Chapter 1377. According to the tradition of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, Dharma gatherings like this were mainly meant to test the young cultivators' current cultivation and future development potential to increase their experience. Therefore, they were usually held between cultivators of the Golden Elixir period and the Foundation Establishment period. For Lin Feng and the others, battles of this level were naturally difficult to catch their attention. Those who had outstanding juniors also thought highly of their potential. Among them, the ones who attracted the most attention were undoubtedly the descendants of Xianmen Tianzong. Any one of them would leave a deep impression on the spectators. The reason they attracted the attention of others, apart from their strength, was undoubtedly because of Xianmen Tianzong himself. There had always been an old saying that a genius who died prematurely was not a genius. No matter how much potential one had, if that potential could not be transformed into true strength, it was all in vain. In the past, the dual-pupiled Shi Tianyi, who was killed by Huang's heavenly emperor Shi Tianhao, Liang'an, the Marquis Jing Huan, who was killed by Yan Emperor Xiao Yan, and Lei Jie, the dragon steed of the Lei family, who was killed by Tang Jun, were all outstanding talents of their time. They were expected to become legends of their generation. But now, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Even if someone remembered them, they would only leave behind a sigh. However, the group of genius disciples of Xianmen Tianzong had the support of their own sections. While the possibility of them dying prematurely was not completely zero, it was undoubtedly reduced to the lowest. At the same time, the possibility of their deep potential being completely unearthed was raised to the highest. In this way, the possibility of them growing into true powerhouses was naturally extremely high. The young talents who stood out in the Dharma gathering today were very likely to become powerhouses in the future, and not too far in the future. Dao Yuding, Zhou Yunsong, Ying Luoza, Lin Tong, and the others at the Kunlun Mountain Dharma gathering in the past were undoubtedly examples. Therefore, now that the outstanding performance of the junior disciples of Xianmen Tianzong was naturally in the eyes of other forces, they were all marked and paid close attention to them. However, for the young talents of other forces, a single comment from Lin Feng and the others was enough to benefit them greatly and benefit them for the rest of their lives. On the other hand, the Essence Soul big shots paid more attention to the exchanges at the elixir meet. On one hand, although the attainments in alchemy were not completely related to the cultivation realm of a cultivator, relatively speaking, the top alchemy masters were mostly concentrated in the primordial soul realm. The highlight of the elixir gathering, other than helping the younger cultivators advance, was usually carried out among the primordial soul realm cultivators. The rare and precious panaceas that were rarely seen on normal days were naturally the most likely to appear in the elixir gathering that was jointly organized by Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient dynasty. Many of the panaceas were highly sought after even by the strongmen of the primordial divinity realm. Even if they could not use them themselves, their disciples might need them. On the other hand, the development of alchemy didn't seem to have much influence, but it had a long history. It often had an immeasurable influence on future development, and it didn't just affect individuals. If a certain sect came up with a new elixir, it would also attract the attention of others. They would evaluate it and predict the changes that might occur in the long term. Crossing Flame Pill. The sect master of the Blaze Sword sect, the venerable swordsman of the Blaze Sword sect, looked at the type of panaceas that Xianmen Tianzong's third generation head Duan Muhong displayed, his gaze moving. The venerable swordsman of the constellation who was sitting beside him faintly smiled. This crossing flame pill of Xianmen Tianzong helps cultivators who train in fire elemental spiritual energy, even absorbing true vicious flames into their body to train. It can give rise to the effects of promotion and protection, reducing the danger and increasing the efficiency. The disciples of Xianmen Tianzong Fen Tianya will basically all choose one of the 7 great true fires to train in. The more outstanding ones will even choose more than one. The development of this crossing flame pill will undoubtedly benefit the disciples of Fen Tianya as a whole. And in the world, other than the 7 great true fires which are the strongest firepower, there are also other spiritual fires and many fire elemental spells that all have a huge effect on cultivators. For example, the ancient dynasty cultivators who train in the Nanmingli fire the reincarnation sect cultivators who train in the Red Lotus karmic fire, etc. The Blaze Sword sect is a sect of the sword, using the sword to establish their path, using sword chi and sword intent to evolve into raging flames, refining flames to aid their own training. They can also use this pill. Gu Jun glanced at Duan Muhang, nodding his head and saying, "This is a pill that he figured out himself?" Sure enough, the younger generation will surpass the older. Lin Feng smiled, saying, "There is still room for him to continue improving and strive for perfection. Coming to the pill gathering this time is also to let him experience the pill refining skills of fellow cultivators in the world, in order to exchange and improve." The Emperor of Qin Shizongtong said, "Sect Master Lin, it is enough for you and the Flame Emperor to guide him. Both of you are top pill masters in the world." Lin Feng said, "You flatter me, fellow Shi. No matter if it is the path of cultivation or the path of pills, they are both as vast as the ocean. Not mentioning Yuan Long. Even me and Xianyan are the same." Shi Zongtong smiled faintly. Sect Master Lin's words are indeed reasonable, but it makes us even more ashamed. Lin Feng shook his head, smiling, saying, "What are you saying, fellow Shi? My master and disciple figuring out the art of pill refining is just a personal interest. We have embarrassed ourselves in front of you fellow cultivators." He sat on the large chair, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest as he leisurely said, "I believe that fellow cultivators should already know that one of the 7 seas of Tianyuan, the Spirit Ocean, is about to reopen." Gu Jun, Shizongtong, Jiwenrui, Beirong First Chanyu, Dao Lord Thundercloud and the other big shots all nodded their heads. "That's right, we already know." After the war between the two worlds ended back then, there was an uproar in the Tianyuan world that the Spirit Ocean of the 7 seas of Tianyuan was about to reopen. At the same time that the Enchantress released the news, he also spread out a portion of the secret keys that could enter the Spirit Ocean, causing a huge uproar in the vast Tianhuang continent, causing many parties to fight over them. Amongst those present, there were also people who participated, but the secret keys were rare and it was not easy to fight over them. Very few people had any gains. Furthermore, the power above the Xianhai, Ing Sea, Netherworld Sea, Star Sea, and Empty Sea, it was as if it was everywhere. Nowhere it couldn't be found. Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and the Yudu race had already taken the initiative. All sorts of rumors, real and fake, circulated endlessly. In addition to Lin Feng taking in the son of Yuhuang Tianhai as his personal disciple, the grudges between both sides in the war between the two worlds, the opposition between Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, the grudges between the Yudu race and Taishu Temple, the secret origins of the Enchantress, and so on made everyone dizzy. Slowly Lin Feng said, "According to my calculations, the day of the Spirit Ocean reopening is not far away." When the others heard this, their gazes froze as they looked at Lin Feng. According to the rumors, the people who had the deepest understanding of the Spirit Ocean were Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and the Yudu race. As Lin Feng said this, he sighed in his heart. Although he had previously felt that the day of the Spirit Ocean reopening might be earlier than when he and the people of Taishu Temple had exited the Spirit Ocean, the degree of advance was much more than what he had expected. The reason was that he had a vague feeling in his heart, and there were some corresponding arrangements that needed to be made decisively. The secret key that was spread out from the hands of the Enchantress is real. Lin Feng first confirmed a guess that everyone had all along, then said, "There is an image of the great Tao returning to its origin in the Spirit Ocean. At the same time, once people enter it, they won't be able to leave in a short period of time." When Gu Jun and the rest heard this, they frowned slightly. They instantly thought of many things, but they didn't interrupt. Instead, they quietly listened to Lin Feng continue to speak. Lin Feng also didn't keep them in suspense and said unhurriedly, "If there are no accidents, I will bring my disciples into the Spirit Sea. The Great Void Monastery will also be the same. Similarly, Yudu clan, with Clan Master Yuda's 12 illusory sons as the leader, I believe the top practitioners will also enter." The fight for the Spirit Ocean was of great importance. No matter if it was Lin Feng, Taishu Temple, or the Yudu race, they would all fight with all their might. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if they could completely control the Spirit Ocean, even if they had to pay the price of Ocean Sanctuary, White Cloud Mountain, or Yudu Royal City, it would still be worth it. And the final ownership of the spirit ocean would undoubtedly affect the power structure of the entire heaven primordial world. Slowly, Ji Wenrui said. However, can the spirit ocean, which is even stronger than Mysterious Sea, Ocean Sanctuary, and Netherworld Seas, be completely controlled by one person? We all know that even though the Void Temple turned the Spirit Sea into a heavenly realm in the past, they only grasped a stable passageway into the Spirit Sea. They are still 108,000 li away from controlling the Spirit Sea. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Times have changed. If we're talking about opportunities, this is the most suitable one. He looked around at everyone. However, even though the enchantress has spread the secret key to the spirit ocean, there is a limit to it, and only a small number of people will obtain it. To prevent others from coveting it, they will usually keep it a secret, so we don't know who among the strong practitioners of the demon race will have the chance to enter the spirit ocean like the enchantress. Let's not talk about the cultivators of our divine land. The situation over at Heaven Wasteland Vastland is confusing now, and it's hard to know what they are planning. Lin Feng didn't finish his sentence, but Gu Jun and the rest had undoubtedly understood what he meant. Their expressions instantly became solemn. If Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple were to head to the spirit ocean together, the human cultivation world of the divine land would immediately become extremely weak. Although it was a bit embarrassing, the people present would not deceive themselves at this time. The Xian Gate Sky sect and the Void Temple were not here. In the face of a peak great demon, other than the ancient imperial dynasty and the Mount Shu Sword sect, the other forces in the entire divine continent would find it difficult to contend against it. If Shi Xingyan was willing to help, the Great Qin dynasty could be considered as the third force. Even though the Yudu race and the enchantress would most likely head to the spirit ocean, and the Phoenix race wouldn't take the initiative to invade the divine land, there were still the dragon race and the primordial devil ape race in Heaven Wasteland Vastland. It was hard to predict whether they would obtain the secret key, enter the spirit ocean, or stay in the world. If these two forces attacked with full force, even the ancient dynasty, Mount Shu Sword sect, and the Great Qin dynasty would be under great pressure. Furthermore, the future Master Buddha had descended into the world and revived Buddhism, but traces of him had been hard to find. When Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple were no longer around, it was also unknown what they would do. The king of the underworld had gone into seclusion after being severely injured back then, so no one knew what his current situation was. Gu Jun looked at Lin Feng and nodded slightly. The last betrothal gift from Xianmen Tianzong, the improved Li Fire divine art, and the things that had been foretold were indeed here. Chapter 1378. For the cultivators of Xianmen Tianzong, if Lin Feng went to the spiritual sea with the top powerhouses in the sect, the other people in the sect would be safe with Yinghai as their backup. There would definitely be a huge difference between the others managing Yinghai and Lin Feng. If the outside world wanted to break through it, it would be impossible. With the return of the will of the Xiantian treasure tree, even if Lin Feng entered the spiritual sea, the Xiantian treasure tree and Yujing Mountain could still hide in the void, and would not show themselves like last time. With such double insurance, Lin Feng could be said to be the person with the least worries. However, it was hard to say what would happen to the other human forces in the divine land. As long as 3 great demons of the Age of Enlightenment came to the divine land, the human cultivation world would be under great pressure. The most worrisome was the lord of the dragon clan, Tenryu Zhen, who was in the middle tribulation stage. After losing the deterrence of Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, once he stepped out of Yinghai and set foot on the divine land, the human world would immediately be in a precarious situation. Lin Feng looked at the crowd and said slowly, "My sword attendant, Xuanli, will not enter the spiritual sea with me. She will stay in the divine land." However, the divine land is vast, and even she can only stay in one place to serve as a deterrent. However, if the demons fully invade, it is inevitable that she will lose sight of the others. Fellow Taoists, you should also prepare for a rainy day. When they heard that Lin Feng would leave the sky punishment sword in the divine land, and not bring it into the spiritual sea, everyone's eyes lit up. After hearing Lin Feng's words, they also nodded slightly. The Xianmen Heavenly Sect had Mount Yujing and Yinghai as the foundation barrier to protect their own disciples. Although they could also try to beg the Xianmen Heavenly Sect to allow them to climb Mount Yujing or enter Yinghai to take refuge. In this way, the defense on the vast land of the Divine Land would be completely empty, and the whole world would inevitably suffer a great disaster. As for the spoils and fruits of victory from the war between the two worlds, it was equivalent to handing them over without any resistance. More importantly, the foundations of countless forces might be destroyed. The cultivators of Xianmen Tianzong could defend first, and then retreat according to the situation. However, the other forces might not have enough time to react. If they wanted to retreat to Yujing Mountain or Yinghai to take refuge, they could only retreat as soon as possible. However, in this way, the territory that could still be defended by great demons of higher realms was now completely empty. Any demon clan that had attained the undying demon soul realm, or even the demon king realm, could cause great destruction and rampage as they pleased. Although it was said that as long as there was life, there was hope, but unless it was absolutely necessary, no force would give up their sect's foundation for nothing. After all, situations like Xianmen Tianzong's Yujing Mountain were far too rare. No matter which sect it was, the sect's foundation had been built up over a long period of time. Not only was the sect's defense strong, but the spiritual energy in the sect's veins had also been painstakingly improved by generations of predecessors, making it extremely suitable for the sect's disciples to cultivate. If the ancestral master of any sect wanted to establish a sect, he would definitely choose a place with abundant spiritual energy. If only the sect was destroyed, it might take a lot of time, energy, and resources, but it might be possible to rebuild it. However, if even the spiritual energy in the local veins was completely destroyed, there would be no possibility of rebuilding, and they would have to find another place. In this way, the force would be greatly weakened. Since the development of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, most of the blessed lands with abundant spiritual energy were already occupied. Unless they had never been discovered, they were almost never left unused. If the sect of many forces was destroyed, it would be very difficult for each of them to find a suitable place to rebuild their sect. As for the resources, mines, spirit herbs, and spiritual fields that belong to each force, it would be fine if they could take them away. If they couldn't, they would naturally stay where they were and watch the big demons come to them. Generally speaking, be it the demons of planet Tianhuang or the human cultivators of the divine continent, unless there was a deep hatred between them, the main purpose of the war was to occupy resources and grotto heavens and treasures. Purely destructive attacks rarely happened. However, the situation now was special. It was hard to predict what the demons, who had just suffered a huge loss in the war between the two worlds, would do. Maybe they would also be worried that after the Battle of the Spirit Sea ended, Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple would return to the boundless world and launch a counterattack. However, no one could be sure what the outcome of the Battle of the Spirit Sea would be. The strongest Yudu race among the demons would definitely enter the Spirit Sea and fight with Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple. The situation in the Spirit Sea was complicated and special. Even if Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple wanted to work together to kick the demons out first and then decide the winner among the humans, it could only exist in their imagination. It was hard to put it into action. By then, both sides could only plan on their own. When they really met each other, it would probably be the most crucial moment to decide victory or defeat. At that time, there would naturally be no need to talk about who would give way. Everyone could only fight for it with all their might. It was also because of this special situation that the enchantress and the others had the chance to fish in troubled waters. As Lin Feng had said, if Xianli stayed in the Divine Land to guard it, she would naturally be able to deter the demons. However, the Divine Land was vast, and she might not be able to defend it perfectly, even though Xianli could move on her own. If the demons really barged into the Divine Land, they would try their best to avoid her. Lin Feng said, "Fellow Taoists, there's no need to worry too much. Once I and Tai One Venerable from Taishu Temple enter the Spirit Sea, we will definitely be cut off from the outside world. However, we don't know when we will be able to return. Even though the demons are wild, we will always be tense." As long as the situation in the divine land doesn't collapse instantly, and can be delayed for some time, under the care of my sword attendant Xianli, there shouldn't be any big problems. Gu Jun, Shizongtang, and the rest looked at Lin Feng and slowly nodded their heads. In the end, heaven helps those who help themselves. Even if heaven punishment sword hung above the divine continent to deter the demons, if they really wanted to be safe and sound, they still had to rely on their own abilities. Reinforcements flew to the rescue, but those waiting to be rescued couldn't even slow down the enemy's footsteps. They were all dealt with directly, and everything was for naught. In a huge opportunity, there was naturally a huge danger, and the battle for the Spirit Sea was the same. The great Qin Emperor, Shizongtang, sat on his seat with his brows furrowed. He was deep in thought, as if he was having a hard time making a decision. His gaze looked towards Lin Feng, his gaze revealing a bit of struggle, but then became calm, his tightly furrowed brows gradually relaxing, his expression once again becoming calm and without ripples. Over the years, although Shi Xingyun would occasionally return to West Hill City to visit his mother and brother Shi Chongyun, he still maintained a distance from the Great Qin dynasty. The Great Qin dynasty urgently needed to strengthen itself. The path of karma of Buddhism and the successive changes of the leaf-fire divine technique of the ancient dynasty finally made Shizongtang make up his mind to give it a try. If the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique could be successfully improved, not only would the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty benefit, but the defensive formation of West Hill City and the qi of the dragon veins that the throne of the Great Qin dynasty could absorb would also be improved. If these changes were to be considered as a drop in the bucket in a short period of time, the improved Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique would also be of great help to Shi Xingyun. For Shi Xingyun, the speed at which he was improving had gradually slowed down. It was time for him to achieve a breakthrough and improve further. Shi Xingyun was close to Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao in Xianmen Tianzong. He also knew that Shi Xingyun and Zhu Yi had also discussed Dao. However, the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique was a top-notch orthodoxy of the Great Qin dynasty. Unlike the Great Tempest Temple, which had long been destroyed, the Great Qin dynasty still existed. Furthermore, they had always been close to Xianmen Tianzong. Therefore, Xianmen Tianzong would not directly bypass them and touch the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique. Shizongtang and the others did not feel the feedback from the Tao of heaven and earth. Similarly, although Shi Xingyun had almost left the Great Qin dynasty and was like a rogue cultivator, when she discussed Tao with Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and the others, it was only about the Tao of heaven and earth. She did not reveal the specific secrets of the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique to Xianmen Tianzong. However, just like in the ancient dynasty, if Xianmen Tianzong really had the ability to help improve the primordial Tao of longevity technique, the final betrothal gift would undoubtedly be more important than all the previous gifts. If Xianmen Tianzong really helped the Great Qin dynasty improve the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique, it would be a great favor. However, Shizongtang had no choice but to seriously consider this matter. This was because no one could be sure if the dragon tribe had obtained the secret key to enter the spiritual sea. No one knew if the dragon tribe would go to the spiritual sea or stay in the colossal world when the spiritual sea was opened. The Great Qin dynasty even suspected that even if the dragon tribe had obtained the secret key to the spiritual sea, they would not enter the spiritual sea immediately. Instead, they would wait for Xianmen Tianzong and the Taishu Temple to enter the spiritual sea. Then, they would rush to the divine land to deal with the Qin dynasty and Shi Xingyun at the risk of losing the opportunity to fight for the spiritual sea. This time, without Lin Feng and the Taishu Temple, Tenryu Zhen, who was in the middle tribulation stage, would set foot in the divine land. Unless Xuanli stayed in West Hill City, the Great Qin dynasty would immediately face a disaster. In fact, the Qin dynasty had been seriously considering this issue for the past few years. This was also a way for them to show their goodwill when they tried to bring Shi Xingyun back to the Great Qin dynasty. And this time, after seeing that ball of Nanmingli fire in Xiao Yan's hands before, and also finding out from Lin Feng that the Spirit Sea isn't far from reopening, Shizongtang finally gradually made up his mind. Similar to Shizongtang, the other cultivators were also feeling complicated. Countless thoughts were running through their minds. Lin Feng looked at the people around him and said calmly, "We are all from the same faction in the divine land. I do not wish to see any of us suffer a calamity. In 3 days' time, I will borrow the treasured land of the ancient emperor to give a lecture. If you are interested, you can send your disciples here. Take it as a token of my sincerity." When the people heard this, their bodies trembled slightly. They could tell that Lin Feng was implying that any of them could seek help from Xianmen Tianzong to perfect their Tao. Chapter 1379. The commotion caused by the karma discussion back then had gradually subsided over time. However, today, because of the Li Fire God technique and the possible future primordial Tao of longevity, it had stirred up waves again. Under the superposition, it was even more intense. Although because of their foundation and limited time, the vast majority of them would not be able to improve their Tao techniques when facing the great demon of the declining age. However, they were still extremely tempted. After all, it was a real increase in strength, and it would have a far-reaching impact on the foundation of 1,000 years. Everyone looked at Lin Feng, who had a calm expression, and many thoughts floated in their minds. Is the master of the celestial sect really comparable to the world master? Compared to Shi Zongtang, who had regained his calm expression, the sect master of the Mount Shu sword sect, Ji Wenrui, on the other side, although his expression did not change, he closed his eyes. No one could see the light that constantly flashed in his eyes. The state of mind of this great sword cultivator was undoubtedly a little turbulent. He, Sword Venerable Tiangang, and the others were not as stubborn as Sword Venerable Tsongming back then. Instead, they re-examined their own inheritance. These years, they had been constantly trying to push aside the clouds and discern the path in front of them. However, at this moment, Ji Wenrui felt that time waited for no man. Once the divine land was empty, they and the Great Qin dynasty would be in the most danger. The pressure that the Great Qin dynasty faced came from the dragon race, while the Mount Shu sword sect had to worry about the primordial demon ape race. The earliest enmity between Mount Shu and the primordial demonic ape tribe stemmed from the fact that the sword ancestor, Ren Changmei, had killed the great sage Zhu Yan of that generation. As a result, the extreme emperor Divine Abyss, who was the leader of the demonic ape tribe, had attacked Mount Shu. If it were not for the help of other experts of the human tribe, Mount Shu sword sect would have been destroyed on the spot. Even so, they suffered heavy losses and suffered the greatest catastrophe in the history of the sect. After the death of Ji Huang Xinyuan, the primordial demon ape race gradually fell into a trough. In the long years that followed, the relationship between the Mount Shu sword sect in the Divine Land and the primordial demon ape race had always been at odds. The Mount Shu sword sect hoped to avenge the humiliation, but they had never been able to do so. Both sides had killed and injured each other, especially the Zhuyan demonic ape clan, which could be said to be old enemies with the Mount Shu sword sect. Now that the current great sage Zhuyan had entered the Dharma-ending realm, and the current leader of the ape tribe, the great sage, was even more powerful. If the two demons set foot on the divine land at the same time, and descended upon Mount Shu, the Big Dipper swordsman would not be able to hold the fort alone. Ji Wenrui's eyes were closed as if he was resting, but his heart was definitely not calm. He was constantly thinking. The reason why he was invited was because Xianmen Tianzong had briefly mentioned the matter of the spiritual ocean. For Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, this was a great opportunity, but for Mount Shu sword sect, there was no doubt that there was a huge hidden danger. If the primordial demon ape tribe also obtained the secret key to the spiritual sea, and focused their attention on the spiritual sea, the Shushan sword sect would naturally not be afraid after the spiritual sea reopened. Even if Great Saint Zhuyan still attacked, as long as the omnipotent sage did not arrive, the Mount Shu sword sect would still be able to hold on for a short time, even though it would be under great pressure to deal with it. If the great sage Zhuyan could not end the battle quickly with the sky-crushing sword in the divine land, then he would have to worry about whether he could return to infinite wasteland alive. But if the great sage did not have the secret key to the spiritual sea, then after Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple left, the Shushan sword sect would be under great pressure. Other forces were more or less facing risks, but not as obvious as the Great Qin dynasty and the Shushan sword sect. Of course, compared to Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, the grievances between them and the demon tribe were nothing. Xianmen Tianzong had Yujing Mountain and Yinghai, which were easy to defend and hard to attack. Taishu Temple was a more obvious target and faced the same risks as the Shushan sword sect and the Great Qin dynasty, except that Taishu Temple was relatively stronger. Sword Venerable Tong Tian said. Sect Master Lin, can we find a way to ambush and kill the great demons who dare to invade the divine land after the spiritual sea opens? As you said before, it is hard to communicate between the spiritual sea and the spiritual sea. The demon tribe cannot be sure if the cultivators of your sect and Taishu Temple have entered the spiritual sea. He did not say something, but everyone present had the same thought. Among the top powers of the human race and the demon race, among those who could clearly enter the spirit sea, the human race occupied Xian Gate Heavenly Sect and Great Void Temple, while the demon race only had Yudu race. If Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple could form an alliance, one of them would enter the spiritual sea first and not let Yudu race take the initiative, while the other would return and hide in the divine land to ambush the great demons. In that case, the situation would no doubt be very advantageous to the human cultivation world. But the problem is, not to mention the relationship between the Xian Gate Sky Sect and the Void Temple. The atmosphere is tense, even if the two sides are allies, when it comes to the ownership of the spirit sea. Who would be willing to work for the other? Those who entered the spiritual sea first might not be the first. Refining the spiritual sea wasn't something that could be done in one go. And even if they entered the spiritual sea first, they would have to face the competition of Yudu race. However, those who entered the spiritual sea first would undoubtedly have a huge advantage. In the current situation in the divine land, Xianmen Tianzong was undoubtedly in an advantageous position. If Taishu Temple obtained the spiritual sea, the situation would probably change immediately. However, in the depths of everyone's heart, Taishu Temple obtaining the spiritual sea was no doubt a nightmare. But Xianmen Tianzong obtaining the spiritual sea might not be a good thing either. This had nothing to do with their relationship with Xianmen Tianzong, and it had nothing to do with their feelings. It was purely the self-awareness of being in charge of an area, other than beyond Heaven Mountain, which was completely dependent on Xianmen Tianzong and was like a branch. As long as the other powers had their own thoughts, they wouldn't be willing to have an eternal mountain appear above their heads. As long as they had the power to interfere and stop it, they would spare no effort to do so. This logic was also applicable to Taishu Temple. However, the conditions to enter the spiritual sea were very harsh, and people didn't have the energy to spare. When they couldn't think of anything else, they completely gave up on the idea. Gu Jun looked at Heavenly Sword Venerable and said with a solemn expression, "We also can't be sure which strong practitioners of the demon race have entered the spiritual sea. If other than the Yudu race and the Enchantress, the strong practitioners of the dragon race and the primordial devil ape race have also entered the spiritual sea at the first instant, while only one of us humans has entered, wouldn't the pressure on the spiritual sea be too great? Boundless World is only setting up an ambush and not taking the initiative to attack. If the other party doesn't come, it'll be a waste of time. If we're talking about taking the initiative to attack, then we're back to the previous problem. We can't be sure which of the demon races are weak." Sword Venerable of the Thunderous said. "Even if we take the initiative to attack, it'll be effective. Unless we take down the dragon race's Xianhai. If the spiritual sea is lost and falls into the hands of the demon race, it'll affect the overall situation extremely badly." Heavenly Sword Venerable of the Thunderous nodded. "You're right." The atmosphere suddenly became weird, and there was a strange silence. Lin Feng sat on his chair and tapped his fingers on the armrest. Looking at this scene, his lips curled into an unnoticeable smile. Even though no one said it out loud, but Lin Feng also roughly knew what was going on with the strange situation in front of him. To the other powers of the divine continent, in the current situation, excluding the problem of the conflict between the human race and the demon race, looking at the entire heaven primordial world as a whole, the Yudu race obtaining the spirit sea wasn't necessarily an unacceptable result. In some sense, it was even better than the Great Void Temple, or the Xianmen Heaven sect obtaining the spirit sea. If the Yudu race obtained the spiritual sea, The first to bear the pressure would be the demons of Heaven Wasteland. This meant that a new generation of demon saint emperors would be born. Then, even if the Yudu race's spearhead was pointed at the Divine Land, they would still look for Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple. In the long run, there was no doubt that there would be endless trouble. If Mirage Sun and Yudu's abilities continued to grow, or if some great Yudu demon rose up and reappeared the power of Heavenly Sea and Yudu in the past, it would only be a matter of time before he, who had the power of the spiritual sea, swept through Heaven Wasteland. If there had to be an uncertain factor, it would be Xianmen Tianzong, who had occupied the Divine Land. But his abilities were still rising. It was hard to predict his limits. Under such a dangerous situation, Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple would finally work together. Heaven Punishment Sword and Haotian Mirror would also work together. The difference in abilities between the two sides and the odds of victory would become confusing. The overall situation of Heaven Wasteland would also sink into a chaotic, yet balanced state. Such a state was undoubtedly more suitable for the survival and rise of other powers. However, this kind of thinking could only be thought in the bottom of their hearts. No one would say it out in the open. Besides, most of the people on the scene couldn't participate in the Battle of the Spirit Sea. Even if they had any thoughts or expectations in their hearts, they were just personal thoughts. To them, the most pressing problem in front of their eyes was naturally the danger they might face in the Battle of the Spirit Sea. Therefore, 3 days later, Lin Feng and Eternal Life City opened an altar to give a lecture. Many powers sent their most outstanding disciples to listen to the lecture. Lin Feng's lecture on the altar was simple and profound. He didn't touch on the specific techniques, but expounded on the great Tao of heaven and earth. These things were also firmly remembered by the people listening to the lecture. Even if they couldn't completely understand many things, they would bring them back to their elders. These principles from a strategically advantageous position made the top strong practitioners feel that they had gained a lot. This trip wasn't in vain. Even if there were no follow-up events, they had still benefited a lot. Of course, the thing that could directly benefit them was the private consultation after the lecture. This was private consultation. As for what the consultation was about, only the people involved knew. However, the bystanders could roughly guess, because everyone came for this. In the days that followed, as time went by, there would be some cultivators who felt the great Tao of heaven and earth faintly vibrating when they were practicing their Tao. According to the difference in the depth of the Tao, the time would vary. Then there would be news from Kunlun Mountain, asking people to go to Yujing Mountain to receive the lecture. The human cultivation world in the Divine Land seemed to be gradually ushering in a brand new situation. Chapter 1380. The Dharma Assembly and Elixir Assembly were still in full swing. However, the top bigwigs of the various factions were all focused on Lin Feng's speech later on. Lin Feng was giving a lecture in Longevity City. As the host, the ancient dynasty would naturally be present. The current ancient emperor Gu Jun was personally accompanying him on the side. There were also other experts from the ancient emperor's bloodline who were listening as well. After listening for a while, Gu Yuankai muttered to himself. After a while he said, "It seems to be an extremely simple principle, and there doesn't seem to be anything special about it. However, if you think about it carefully, you can vaguely sense a deeper meaning. It seems that every time you think about it, you will gain something completely different." Naturally, he used his magic power to transmit his voice. His voice could only be heard by the cultivators of the ancient dynasty. When the cultivators of the ancient dynasty with lower cultivation heard this, they all thought carefully, and their eyes gradually revealed a look of understanding. Gu Qing looked at Gu Yuankai and said, "The truth can be seen in plain sight. The more it is like this, the more profound his cultivation is." In the past, the other party was more inclined to cooperate with Taishu Temple and had reservations about Xianmen Tianzong. The reason was not because of hostility, but because it was difficult to grasp Xianmen Tianzong's potential. However, at this moment, the group of ancient clan cultivators led by Gu Yuankai had long changed their stance. Xianmen Tianzong had already successfully displayed strength that surpassed that of Taishu Temple. Furthermore, he was far from reaching the peak and was still constantly climbing. If there were no major changes, then as time passed, the gap between Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple would only grow, and Xianmen Tianzong's advantage would become more and more obvious. From the ancient dynasty's perspective, they naturally did not wish to see the emergence of such a colossal figure. However, as their overall policy changed, they could now calmly face the changes and development of Xianmen Tianzong. As Xianmen Tianzong's strength continued to grow, the new #1 Holy Land of the Divine Land became more and more aloof. It did not interfere with the development of the ancient dynasty and other forces in the Divine Land. Hearing Gu Cheng's words, Gu Yuankai nodded. Truth can be seen in plain sight. The Profound Gates sect master has long since reached the level of returning to the natural state and seeing the great Tao. It is to be expected that he would have such knowledge. Gu Cheng sighed softly. The other betrothal gifts are fine, but this last gift is really heavy. Gu Yuankai and the others did not speak, but they all had expressions of approval on their faces. Putting aside how important the improvement of the primordial way of longevity manual was to the ancient dynasty, it was not entirely true that the ancient dynasty's gains were not unique and superior to the other sects that had improved as well. This time, Lin Feng chose Longevity City as the venue for his lecture, and not his own Kunlun Mountain Range's Yujing Mountain. He also chose the time of Xiao Yin and Xiao Zhen'er's engagement, and not any other time. Not only tangible and tangible things could be considered gifts. Gu Jun said indifferently, the Profound Gates sect master has a grand bearing, and he has always cared for his disciples. Although it is unexpected for him to be so generous, it is also reasonable. He and Xiaoyan will not ask for anything in return, but courtesy demands reciprocity. Our dynasty naturally cannot do nothing. Gu Cheng and Gu Yuankai looked at Gu Jun. Gu Jun looked at Lin Feng on the altar and slowly said, in this time's battle for the Spirit Sea, there may be undercurrents surging in the vast land of the divine continent. The strong practitioners of the ancient dynasty nodded slightly when they heard this. To most people in the heaven primordial world, no matter if it was the demon race or the human race, they did not want the Spirit Sea to fall into the hands of Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, or the Yudu race. The few that obtained the Spirit Sea secret key naturally hoped that their family could have the luck to obtain the Spirit Sea. That would be the best result. If it really didn't work, then they would settle for the next best thing. No one would get it, and it would be better to maintain the status quo. If it was obtained by any power other than Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and the Yudu race, it was barely acceptable. However, if it was obtained by one of the three, it would be the worst result. To Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, the bigger worry was that other than the Yudu race, they were uncertain about the movements of the other strong races of the demon world. They might encounter greater pressure in the Spirit Sea than expected, and they might also face the possibility of a serious fire in the backyard of the Divine Land. As for the elusive future star-glazed Buddha Master, and the King of the Underworld, it was hard to predict what they would do in this battle of the Spirit Sea. With the lack of information from all sides, it was easy for unexpected things to happen. Even if Lin Feng was proficient in the path of karma deduction, the clues in front of him were blurry and not clear enough. Slowly, Gu Jun said, this time to the Divine Land, it might not be inferior to the previous war between the two worlds. We will be careful. The ancient dynasty didn't obtain the Spirit Sea secret key that was scattered by the enchantress. It was obvious that they were going to stay in the Divine Land this time. Unlike the previous war between the two worlds, the ancient dynasty only joined in the middle of the war. This time, the ancient dynasty was the first to bear the brunt of the conflict. Although it was a long time ago, when the ancient emperors were at the peak of their power, they also had many bloody battles with the demon race. Unlike the Mount Shu Sword sect, which mainly had a grudge with the Zhuyan Devil Ape race, the ancient emperor didn't have a good relationship with the heavenly Devil Ape race. The current master of the ape race was the Great Sage. At the same time, there was also a feud between the ancient emperor and the dragon race. Although it wasn't as serious as the feud between the Qin dynasty and Shi Xingyun, it was still tense. The ancient dynasty was located in the southern border. One of the realm passageways that led to the Divine Land in the vast Tianhuang mainland was also here. However, this conflict might be an opportunity for the ancient dynasty. Although the ancient dynasty had participated in the war and spared no effort, they didn't make much progress because they joined the war late. As a result, it was of limited use in raising their prestige. The Battle of the Spirit Sea this time was one of the few top forces in the Divine Land after the Taishu Temple and Xianmen Tianzong went to the Spirit Sea. For the ancient dynasty, danger coexisted with opportunity. With proper planning, it might be a good opportunity to improve themselves. Now we're waiting for good news from Xianmen Tianzong. However, we can't have thoughts of relying on them and slacking off. That will only bring harm to our cultivation. Everyone understands this, so I won't say more. Gu Jun said, the primordial Tao of longevity mantra is the foundation of our dynasty. Its improvement will affect all aspects. Everyone be prepared. If the demons don't have the upper hand in the upcoming battle of the Spirit Sea, the situation in the Divine Land will change drastically. Our dynasty must also be prepared. His gaze was distant and full of vicissitudes. If it's as I expected, the master of the Mystic Gate has great ambitions. Now that he has shown hope of success, our dynasty will continue to follow him. Gu Cheng Gu Yuankai and the other big shots of the ancient dynasty bowed to Gu Jun. Yes, Your Majesty. The Dharma Assembly and Elixir Convocation in Longevity City were carried out in a stable and orderly manner. The top big shot's attention was focused on Lin Feng, the master of the Mystic Gate, while the cultivators with lower cultivation levels were still paying attention to the Dharma Assembly and Elixir Convocation. The process of the Dharma Assembly was turbulent and fierce, but the result was calm. The most outstanding one was still the successor of Xianmen Tianzong. Now, it was publicly acknowledged in the Divine Land that the higher one's cultivation level was, the greater the gap between the Xianmen Tianzong cultivators and the successors of other forces, and the more obvious the advantage they had. Looking at those true disciples of the Mystic Gate, who were already eye-catching during the Golden Elixir period, and even at the Foundation establishment stage, everyone felt that there was no hope of catching up. When the gap was large enough, emotions like jealousy and hatred would gradually become difficult to sustain. Instead, they would slowly turn into yearning and admiration. Now the excellence of the Xianmen Tianzong cultivators could no longer change the emotions of the crowd. If something big happened to the successor of Xianmen Tianzong, then it would attract the attention of others. The dark horse in the Dharma Assembly that truly exceeded everyone's expectations came from the Mount Shu Sword Sect. The Mount Shu Sword Sect, which had been sealed off for many years, actually had a junior disciple brought by Ji Wenrui to participate in this Dharma Assembly. Among them, the performance of Mount Shu's rising star made everyone gasp in surprise. At this time, people seemed to remember that even if the Mystic Gate's swordsmanship had surpassed it, the Mount Shu Sword Sect was still the top holy land of swordsmanship in the world. However, in these years, because Mount Shu had sealed off its mountain, its reputation was weak, and its activities in the outside world were reduced, causing many of the younger generation who yearned for swordsmanship to turn and enter other sections. The Light Dance Pavilion branch of Xianmen Tianzong was naturally the first choice. Those who couldn't enter Xianmen Tianzong were also absorbed by the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, the Celerita Sword Sect, and other sword sections. In everyone's understanding, the Mount Shu Sword Sect, which also had the support of its own medium-class world population, might not be in a situation where there was a complete shortage of talents, but the material selection was severely reduced. This would undoubtedly greatly slow down the speed at which the Mount Shu Sword Sect recovered. The resources of the younger generation of disciples were exhausted, and they needed a long time to recuperate. But obviously, under the influence of Sword Lord Celestial Dipper, Ji Wenrui, and Sword Lord Li Meng, this former #1 holy land of swordsmanship was constantly recovering its own vitality. The sharpness seemed to be restrained, like a sharp sword returning to its scabbard. But the blade that was nurtured in the scabbard was still sharp, and at the same time, there was a bit more vitality that hadn't been seen for many years. Other than the successor of Xianmen Tianzong, among the young disciples who participated in the spell gathering, the successor of the Mount Shu Sword Sect had the most eye-catching performance. Only the young cultivators of the ancient dynasty, who were the host, could compare with them. The limelight of the younger generation disciples of the great Zhou dynasty the Great Qin Dynasty, the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Northern Militant Imperial Court, and other forces were all overshadowed. Compared to the spell gathering where everyone showed off their skills, the pill gathering obviously had more harvests. More or less, all the participants had their own gains. Later on, resources other than pills were also circulating in large amounts. Lin Feng had opened the altar to speak for many days. With the official end of the spell gathering and the pill gathering, he also put away the altar and led his disciples to bid farewell to Gu Jun and the others. After bidding farewell to the other fellow Taoists who had come to watch the ceremony, they returned to Mount Yujing in the Kunlun mountain range. Returning to Mount Yujing, he sent a group of younger disciples back to their respective caves. Lin Feng came to the third floor of the Tower of Scriptures and sat on the ground. Looking at the group of disciples in front of him, he smiled and said, "The Tao of heaven and earth is too wonderful for words. You should carefully study it. The day of the reopening of the spiritual sea is gradually approaching. Our sect should also try our best to be comprehensive." Lin Feng said to Zhu Yi, "Xiaoyi, you will take the lead in perfecting and sublimating the Tao of other forces." Then Lin Feng looked at the four of them, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu. "Follow your second senior brother. Take what you are interested in and study it carefully. Verify it with our sect's Yin and Yang true scripture, and what you have learned and comprehended in the past. Walk your own path." "Yes, master." Zhu Yi and the others nodded in agreement. Chapter 1381. After giving instructions to Zhu Yi and the others, Lin Feng turned to Xiao Yan, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao. "Little Yan, you should stay in the Nether Sea and refine Heaven's Bane in the Nether Sea. There's no need to rush. Just let nature take its course." Lin Feng first said to Xiao Yan, "You don't have to participate in this trip to the Nether Sea. Refining the Nether Sea with all your might is the right thing for you." Xiao Yan smiled. "Master, I'm really sorry that I can't participate in such a big event." Although he said that, his eyes were calm, without the slightest fluctuation. Clearly, he understood Lin Feng's good intentions. Beside him, Shi Tianhao joked, "Eldest senior brother, you're staying to look after the house this time." Xiao Yan waved his fist at Shi Tianhao. Lin Feng and the others couldn't help but laugh. "All these years, you've always felt that someone was obstructing you when refining the Nether Sea. One of them is naturally the Grand Elder of Taishu Temple, Wu Mingqi," Lin Feng said. "As for the other, in order to appease us in Taishu Temple, the Nether Sea voluntarily gave up its influence on Heaven's Bane and the Nether Sea. Thus, it obtained the chance to secretly seize the Haotian mirror. His disciple, Taoist Yu Ming, could also use the power of the Nether Sea. However, he lost this ability during the war between the two worlds. So, it can be concluded that Taoist Yu Ming was plotted against by his disciple, Shin Tizhe. The other person who is obstructing you from refining the Nether Sea is most likely Shin Tizhe." Dots of light faintly flickered within Lin Feng's eyes. This time when the Spirit Sea reopens, no matter if it's the Void Temple's Wu Mengqi or that Shin Tizhe, they'll both make a move in the Nether Sea. If you follow me into the Spirit Sea, they will seize the opportunity to seize control of the Netherworld Sea as much as possible and erase the marks you have left over the years. If you don't enter the Spirit Sea, they will continue to drag you down. In short, it will not be peaceful." At this moment, the eyes of Zhu Yi and Wang Lin were also glowing. Lin Feng continued, "What we need to be vigilant about is that the king of the underworld is an astute person. It is very likely that he will make use of this opportunity to interfere. Although he has tried his best to conceal it, I can still vaguely see that there are clues connecting him and Taoist Yu Ming, as well as Taoist Yu Ming and Shin Tizhe. If I'm not mistaken, the king of the underworld has been lying low all this time. Although that sword attack from back then caused him great damage, he hasn't wasted all these years. The battle for the spiritual sea is his chance, and he won't miss it. Even if he doesn't have the key, he'll still make use of it." After listening attentively to Lin Feng, Xiao Yan nodded solemnly. "Rest assured, master. Your disciple understands the gravity of the situation." Although Xianli would not follow Lin Feng to the spiritual sea and would stay in the vast thousand domains, as the disciple of sect leader Lin Feng, he was responsible for guarding the divine prefecture. He could not afford to be careless. Although he had Heaven's Bane and the Netherworld Sea to rely on, firstly, he had not fully grasped them. Secondly, Heaven's Bane was hostile to the heaven-punishing sword. If Xianli stepped into the Netherworld Sea and the Spiritual Sea, the result would be the same. Once the Netherworld Sea changed, Xiaoyan could only rely on himself. His greatest reliance might become a shackle instead. Then Lin Feng turned to look at Shi Tianhao and said slowly, "Tianhao, you don't have to rush into the Spiritual Sea when it reopens. I'll leave a key for you, but you have to wait in the Divine Land for a while." Shi Tianhao, who was teasing Xiaoyan just now, was stunned. Xiaoyan burst out laughing. "Rascal, stay and watch the house with me." Shi Tianhao also waved his fist at Xiaoyan. Then, his expression turned solemn as he looked at Lin Feng. "Master, have you discovered my grandfather's whereabouts?" All these years, Shi Tianhao had stayed in the battlefield of the void to search for Shi Zhongtian, but to no avail. Lin Feng answered, "That's right. Although the clues are vague, I can feel that the time for you and your grandfather to reunite is coming soon. However, great fortune also hides great misfortune. So, on the day the Spiritual Sea reopens, you should stay in the Divine Land first. After you find your grandfather, we'll decide what to do." Shi Tianhao immediately nodded and said, "Yes, master. For now, don't continue to enter the battlefield of the void, lest you miss the opportunity to meet your grandfather." Lin Feng said, "These years you've been outside and rarely come back. In the following days, you should cultivate with me boy creation. It will be very beneficial for your cultivation." Behind him, a figure appeared. He was dressed in a black and white Taoist robe. His eyes contained the characteristics of an infant, a teenager, and a middle-aged man. It was like a combination of life and time. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s. His facial features were handsome and charming. Shi Tianhao and the others recognized him. This middle-aged man was the manifestation of the primordial spirit of their master's Dharma treasure, the Bell of Creation. Lin Feng said, "Tianhao, your Dharma, whether it's in Yuan or the Desolate God, both evolve the chaos, the changes of the primitive world, and the cycle of the beginning. You can cultivate together with creation." Shi Tianhao nodded and answered, "I understand." The middle-aged man smiled and bowed to Shi Tianhao. "Please advise me, brother." Shi Tianhao and the others had become familiar with him over the years. They also smiled and bowed. "Please advise me, brother. Creation will enter the Spiritual Sea with me. Before that, how much each of you can gain depends on yourselves," Lin Feng said with a smile and waved his hand. "Go quickly." After instructing Shi Tianhao, Lin Feng looked at Wang Lin. "Little Lin, how's your recent attempt?" Wang Lin revealed a faint smile and answered, "I've made some initial progress, but I still need to continue to figure it out." In his eyes, flowing lights flashed. It wasn't dazzling, but it was breathtaking and eye-catching. Wang Lin's aura gradually changed. His body actually emitted a powerful force of blood and flesh. Although it wasn't as overbearing as Shi Tianhao's Desolate God's body, it was still extremely shocking. Like Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi, and the others, he sat on the ground opposite Lin Feng. His figure didn't seem to have changed, and his aura was also limited to the third floor of the scripture depository, so it wouldn't affect the outside world. However, Lin Feng and the others who were in the same room could all feel the terrifying force of his body, which seemed to tear the void with a single breath. Compared to Shi Tianhao's Desolate God's body, which was majestic and wild like a giant beast, and violent and bloody force, the aura emitted from Wang Lin's body at this moment was extremely vicious, cold, and bloodthirsty. However, what made people feel strange was that Wang Lin's left and right hands and right leg were still normal, and there was no shocking force emitted from them. The terrifying blood and flesh emerged from Wang Lin's head, torso, and left leg, giving people a strange feeling, as if his hands and right leg were prosthetics. Seeing this, Lin Feng revealed a smile on his face and nodded. Not bad, very good. According to your current progress, you can still improve on the day when the Spiritual Sea reopens." Wang Lin replied, "I dare not slack off, and I will cultivate hard." Lin Feng then looked at Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu, and finally his eyes fell on Li Yuanfang, saying, "This time, when the Spiritual Sea reopens, My clone will go to the spiritual sea together. So Yuan Fang, you will also stay behind to guarding high, in case there are thieves taking advantage of the situation to invade. If the situation changes greatly, and we need to evacuate our disciples or disciples of other sects to Yinghai to temporarily hide, you will also be responsible for controlling it. Li Yuanfang nodded his head solemnly. I understand. One must not have the intention to harm others, but one must always be on guard against others. If other forces asked for help to enter Yinghai to take refuge, Xianmen Tianzong would not reject them. However, if someone had ulterior motives and took the opportunity to create trouble, then Li Yuanfang might have to make a prompt decision. He was a righteous person who sought to plan everything properly and followed the prescribed order, but he was definitely not an indecisive person. On the contrary, he handled things swiftly and never showed mercy when it was time to be harsh. Next, Lin Feng looked towards Yang Qing, faintly smiling. Little Qing, back then when the Battle of Mount Shu ended, I once said at that time, after 100 years, you might be able to wait for a chance and have the hope of seeing your lover again. Yang Qing's breathing paused slightly, and her state of mind that had been calm for many years finally shook again. She raised her head to look at her master, but did not say anything, as if she was afraid of waking up from a dream. Lin Feng smiled and nodded. At that time, the chance that I mentioned was the day when the spiritual sea reopened. The spiritual sea is the sea of spiritual qi and the sea of Tao. Thousands of Tao in the world converge and manifest, continuously giving birth and creation. At present, that is the most likely place for your lover to be resurrected. In the past, I deduced that after the Battle of Mount Shu ended, after about 100 years, the spiritual sea will open. However, other changes happened after that, causing the day of the spiritual sea opening to be brought forward. Lin Feng smiled indifferently. However, this is undoubtedly a good thing for you. Yang Qing took a deep breath and muttered to himself. Spiritual sea. Ting ting. He came back to his senses and bowed to Lin Feng. Although he did not say anything, everything was already understood. Lin Feng continued. You also have to be calm. It is not easy to control the spiritual sea, and it is still unknown whether you can reunite or not. Yang Qing stood up and said softly, Master, I understand. It is only a glimmer of hope, and I am already extremely satisfied. Lin Feng nodded slightly. In the following time, cultivate seriously. At that time, you and Hongyan will follow your second senior brother and third senior brother to go to the spiritual sea with me. Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing both nodded calmly. Yes, master. Lin Feng looked at Luo Qinggu. Qinggu, you stay with Yuan Fang. Yuan Fang will guard Yinghai, and you will stay in the divine land. Luo Qinggu replied. Yes, master, I understand. Lin Feng said. In addition to dealing with the various changes that may happen in the divine land, I have one more thing for you to secretly pay attention to. Chapter 1382. Hearing Lin Feng's special reminder, Luo Qinggu couldn't help but look curious. What is it? Please tell me, master. Lin Feng's gaze then turned to Yang Qing. It's about your fifth senior brother's disciple Zhou Yunsong. Upon hearing this, Yang Qing, Luo Qinggu, and the others were slightly stunned at first, and then revealed thoughtful expressions. Although everyone, including Yang Qing, was a little surprised, they all knew that their master would not speak without thinking. Zhu Yi and Wang Lin's eyes revealed some understanding. They looked at each other, and Zhu Yi slowly said, We have to start from the matter of Golden Cicada kidnapping people back then, but it has nothing to do with Golden Cicada. Wang Lin nodded. It's about the matter behind it, which originated from Cloud Song himself. Hearing this, the others also reacted. Xiao Yan sat cross-legged, hands on his knees, and said with a frown, Although the whereabouts of the future star-glazed Buddha Lord and Golden Cicada are uncertain, the matter back then has already been settled for them. Even if they capture Cloud Song again, it will be difficult to gain anything, not to mention that the future Buddha himself has already been born. But if Taishu Temple also wants to enter the spiritual sea, how many people can they spare to make things difficult for our sect? The Tao-changing talismans in Zhu Yi's eyes kept flashing, while Wang Lin's eyes seemed to have become two mirrors, reflecting a mysterious and strange light. Although I can't see it clearly, I feel that it's not necessarily a forcible kidnapping, but some other plan. Zhu Yi said in a low voice. Wang Lin's gaze turned slightly cold. The supreme yin-yang mirror was, after all, a treasure of Taishu Temple in the past. Even if they don't have any special means, they should have some information that we don't know. Li Yuanfang asked calmly, Master, did Mr. Miao say anything about the supreme yin-yang mirror? Lin Feng shook his head and said, Sure Hao had left Taishu Temple long before Chen Xingyu entered the temple, so his knowledge of this matter was limited. Before this matter was quite secretive, and it was almost passed down from the Abbey Dean's lineage. Even the Taishang elders did not know much about it. Xiao Yan said with some regret, in the memory of Taoist Master Red Sun, although he knows that the Taishu Taoist brought the supreme yin-yang mirror into the Dead Sea, he entered the underworld sea because of the battle with Jihuang Xinyuan before the supreme yin-yang mirror broke and returned to the universe. Therefore, his knowledge of this matter is limited. Lin Feng said with a smile. Although the clues at hand are still a little lacking, I have a general idea in my heart. Qinggu, you just have to handle it carefully. When everyone heard this, their spirits were lifted. Luo Qinggu nodded. Please instruct me, Master. At the same time, in White Cloud Mountain, there was another tense scene. At the top of White Cloud Mountain, all the higher-ups of Taishu Temple were present, either in projection or in person. The day of the reopening of the spiritual sea is much earlier than expected. For our temple, there are advantages and disadvantages. The current Abbey Dean of Taishu Temple, Lin Daohan, said in a flat tone. In front of him, Xianlin Taoist, Yin Yuanjin, and the others nodded without saying a word. Although no one said it explicitly, even they had to admit that as time passed, the momentum of Xianmen Tianzong's rise was becoming more and more terrifying. What was more terrifying was that this seemed to be endless. It was just the beginning, and he was far from reaching his peak. As time passed, the growth of Xianmen Tianzong's strength became more and more unimaginable. From this point of view, the early reopening of the spiritual sea might not be a bad thing. However, it was much earlier than expected, and the Haotian mirror still couldn't recover to its peak. To Taishu Temple, this was naturally a disadvantage. After all, Xianmen Tianzong wasn't the only opponent they had to face in the battle of the spiritual sea. Heaven Punishing Sword couldn't enter the spiritual sea, but the Yudu clan would definitely send in a large number of strong practitioners with Clan Master Huan Ri Yudu as their leader. Other than that, it was hard to predict what kind of strong practitioners would interfere with the distribution of the secret key of the spiritual sea from the enchantress, so they had to be on guard. The Grand Elder of Taishu Temple, Kuang Heng, said silently, Now that things have come to this, there's no need to say more. We'll just do our best. Lin Daohan nodded. That's right. That's the logic. Dao Venerable Xianwen said. In the war between the two worlds, the Nine Heavens Imperial Court was broken. Even though we've tried our best to repair it, the damaged vital qi is still hard to recover. After the spiritual sea reopens, if the demon race steps into the divine land, they might covet our temple. The Haotian mirror will still have to leave the divine land and enter the spiritual sea. White Cloud Mountain will become extremely empty. Shoichi Dashin said, This time, I'll stay in the divine land. Lin Daohan said, No, the three of you along with your disciples will enter the spiritual sea. Dazzling brilliance shone in everyone's eyes as they looked at Lin Daohan. Lin Daohan's expression and tone didn't change at all. The master of Xianmen has accepted the son of Yudu in the heavenly ocean as his disciple. His thoughts can already be seen clearly. His thoughts can't be said to be wrong, but we can't say that it's impossible either. However, the risk of failure is also huge, so huge that not only Xianmen Tianzong, but the entire divine land can't bear it. Since our paths are different, we can't work together. We'll definitely have to fight it out with him. And if the spiritual sea falls into the hands of the Yudu race or the demon race, the result will be even more unimaginable. Lin Daohan said calmly, No matter if it's for the sake of bringing order to the divine land or to fight against the demon race, the battle of the spiritual sea is of utmost importance to our temple. We can't afford any mistakes. After we refine the spiritual sea, even if the demons cause havoc on the land, we can still settle accounts with them. Kai Fengzhou frowned slightly. Isn't it too risky? If unpredictable changes happen in the divine land, it'll be hard for our temple to deal with them. Lin Daohan replied softly, it's either the Haotian mirror or the heaven punishment sword. Other than these two, the king of the underworld most likely won't make a move. However, if the Haotian mirror enters the spiritual sea, he won't be able to do anything about the heaven punishment sword. Therefore, if the king of the underworld stays in the boundless world, he'll at most have a backup plan at the netherworld sea. The person who should be wary of him is Xianmen Tianzong. In the future, if the star-glazed Buddha doesn't enter the spiritual sea, he might come to our temple to cut his karma. In that case, we'll return his karma. Due to Golden Cicada's mistake, his golden alms bowl ended up in the hands of the master of the celestial gate. It's also fate. Lin Daohan paused. Speaking of this, it's related to another key point. If I go to the spiritual sea with the three elders, it'll be convenient for us to carry out our plan in the divine land. The master of the celestial gate, Master Yi, and the high venerable of the extreme Tao are all proficient in the way of deducing karma and fate. They might have noticed something, but they probably haven't figured it out yet. The less we get involved, the less clues they can deduce. It'll be easier for us to carry out our plan. Tao Venerable Yu Yuan sighed. If you didn't mention it to Uncle Master Tai, we wouldn't have expected things to turn out this way. Lin Daohan continued. Tianqing Taoist is a variable. But if he returns to the White Cloud Mountain, our temple has prepared a special method for him. At least, we can make him return empty-handed. Everyone present nodded slightly. Although Tianqing Taoist was a grand elder of the Taishu realm in the Dharma-ending realm, he came from the Taishu temple after all. If they were prepared, they wouldn't have to worry about him causing trouble. As for the Nether Sea, we can only ask Uncle Master Wu to act according to the situation. Lin Daohan looked at Wu Mingqi. In Wu Mingqi's eyes, thousands of images of disasters and tribulations in the Nether Sea flashed. He nodded silently and didn't say anything. Lin Daohan said, I have to admit that if the celestial crushing sword of the master of the celestial sect stays in the divine land, the demon clan will become a variable and cause the least harm. At the moment, it's a blessing for the entire divine land, and even we will benefit from it. But at the same time, if the master of the celestial sect enters the spiritual sea, no one will be able to control that evil sword. Once the sword goes out of control, the demon clan and the king of the underworld won't have to do anything evil. The people in the divine land will be plunged into misery and suffering. This is something I can't control the most, but I can only sigh. Lin Daohan's tone had always been flat and emotionless. It was only at this moment that there was a slight fluctuation in his tone. Because the celestial crushing sword couldn't enter the spiritual sea, Xianmen Tianzong's power to fight for the spiritual sea was greatly reduced. But in this way, there was also a hidden danger, which made Lin Daohan feel conflicted. If the celestial crushing sword really went out of control, it would be useless even if Shoichi Dashin stayed. Even if Taiwan supremacy stayed, without the Haotian mirror, there was nothing he could do. On the other side, the fight for the spiritual sea did not allow the Taishu temple to hold back. Man proposes, God disposes. Refining the spiritual sea and combining it with the Haotian mirror, we can suppress this sword. Taiwan supremacy, who had been silent all this time, said at this moment, how can there be anything in this world that is completely satisfactory and without any risks? He closed his eyes, but looked around. Everyone present seemed to feel Taiwan supremacy's gaze. Slowly, Taiwan supremacy said, this time, the reopening of the spiritual sea is very likely related to the future fate of the heaven primordial world. We can only do our best. Lin Daohan, Shoichi Dashin, Xianwen supremacy and the others all nodded. Of course. Shoichi Dashin looked at Quang Hung and said slowly, I'll leave the divine land to you. This time, focus on the spiritual sea. As for the boundless world, don't be hasty and be patient. Quang Hung said calmly, I understand. First, the original plan is the most important. At other times, you can take a step back. Everything will be decided after the dust of the fight for the spiritual sea has settled. His eyes became a little deep. When necessary, we should follow junior brother Yan's example, Xian One Supremacy said. In this fight for the spiritual sea, although our temple has the upper hand, the opponent is equally strong. We need to be careful. If things go wrong, activate the backup plan. Taiwan Supremacy closed his eyes and looked emotionless. In short, do your best. Everyone looked up at the void above the peak of White Cloud Mountain. There, among the thick white clouds, there was a round mirror light. It was faintly visible, as if it was connected to the heavens and the whole boundless world. In the void above the northern foothills of Kunlun Mountain, on the mysterious sky treasure tree at the peak of Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng sat upright silently. All the disciples had already received his orders, and went to either prepare or cultivate. Lin Feng gazed at the empty space in the distance, slowly thinking in his heart. Who would it be? Chapter 1383. As time passed, the day of the reopening of the Spirit Sea finally arrived. The entire great heaven primordial world gradually calmed down, as if it was the last calm before the storm. However, under the calm surface, the undercurrents were surging and would only become more intense than before. News came from the vast land of infinite wasteland that Golden Cicada, who had converted to Buddhism and had not shown himself for a long time, had suddenly reappeared and was tracked down. In the end, under the siege of the experts of the dragon race, he broke out of the encirclement and escaped far away. However, the secret key of the Spirit Sea that he had somehow obtained had fallen into the hands of the dragon race. When the news spread out, everyone was shocked. This meant that the dragon race was almost certain to intervene in the battle of the Spirit Sea. The situation of the Spirit Sea instantly became even more confusing and difficult to predict. However, the human cultivation world of the Divine Land, especially the Great Qin dynasty, still couldn't let their guard down. No one knew if the experts of the dragon race would set aside the Spirit Sea and target them and Shixingyun first. To prevent the Yudu race from getting ahead of them, Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple would definitely rush to the Spirit Sea immediately. When that happened, the Divine Land would be empty, and it would be a good opportunity for the dragon race. The situation in the Great Heaven primordial world became more and more tense. On Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng looked at the golden mirage bead in front of him calmly. He saw a faint golden haze emerging from the bead, and there were purple flowing lights flashing in the golden haze. They became more and more dazzling and intense. It's time. Lin Feng's eyes suddenly flashed, and a Tai Chi pattern could be seen spinning in each of his pupils. He looked into the distant sky. In the eyes of others, there was nothing in the void. At that moment, in Lin Feng's eyes, he could see flowing lights shuttling back and forth, and he seemed to hear the sound of the great Tao. Behind him, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan, and Yang Qing were all waiting silently. At that moment, in the Great Heaven primordial world, all the top experts who held the secret key to the Spirit Sea, regardless of whether it was the Divine Land or the vast land of infinite wasteland, sensed something and became excited. The experts of the Yudu race in the Blackboard world, and the experts of the Taishu Temple at the top of White Cloud Mountain, had been waiting for this moment, just like Lin Feng. Lin Feng stood on a branch of the mysterious sky treasure tree, and formed a spell with his left hand. His right hand stretched out and tapped the golden mirage bead that was floating in midair. The golden mirage bead had turned completely purple. When Lin Feng's finger touched it, a purple light shot into the sky and flew into the ethereal void. The purple light flashed and disappeared, as if it had disappearing into the void. At this time Lin Feng retracted his left hand, the fingers of his left hand lightly tapping on his forehead while the 5 fingers of his right hand changed, forming another spell sign. Lin Feng retracted his left hand and tapped it on his forehead. The fingers of his right hand moved and formed another spell. The black and white Tai Chi pattern, mixed with yin and yang, rotated continuously. White light shone from the center and expanded in all directions. In the end, the Tai Chi pattern disappeared, and was replaced by something that looked like a cave abode and a door. The door was faintly discernible, as if it was hidden in an endless space that folded together. Around the door, A large amount of white smoke and clouds flowed continuously. Countless brilliant lights shot into the sky and intertwined with each other. As Lin Feng's right hand changed the incantation sign, he once again lightly pointed at the door. A stream of purple gas rushed out, continuously traveling upwards in the air. As the purple gas traveled, it changed continuously. Its color became fainter and fainter, until it was almost transparent. However, the concept of its power became more and more mysterious. Gradually, it formed a formless, traceless, but real path. At the end of the path, it extended toward the door that seemed to be above the 9 heavens, getting higher and higher. Zhu Yi and the others stood behind Lin Feng, and carefully analyzed the concept contained in this path. They all seemed to understand something. It wasn't just an extension and rise in the sense of space. It seemed to gradually surpass the general concept of this world, and climb to a higher level. When the color of the purple gas completely dissipated, a mysterious path to heaven appeared between Lin Feng and his disciple and that door. Stepping on this path, everyone could clearly feel the projection of the laws of the Great Path appearing on their spiritual platforms. It was a memorable experience. However, at this moment, there was a hum of a sword on Jade Capital Mountain. Wherever the sword hum passed, the pleasant sound of the Great Path immediately faded. It was as if a sentient being had been mercilessly killed. Lin Feng laughed softly. He saw Xianli standing beside him expressionlessly. Her eyes were also staring at the door in the void. Her gaze was cold and sharp. And there was a unique aura coming from the door. Everyone's attention fell on Xianli. At this moment, the mysterious spirit sea seemed to have a life of its own. It was awakened from its slumber and looked at Xianli cautiously. As the two's auras intersected, they instantly confronted each other. It was a rivalry and hostility rooted in the source. Xianli's gaze did not have the slightest warmth. She looked at the door of the spirit sea coldly. Her gaze was like a sharp sword that pierced through the mysterious domain and went deep inside, stirring up the great path in the spirit sea. That lofty and illusory door was constantly distorting at this moment, and rays of light burst forth from it. So, you can't go in with me this time. Lin Feng smiled and said, stay in the divine land. The cold light in Xianli's eyes gradually dissipated. She regained her calmness. The fierce aura that could destroy the heavens also gradually calmed down. The door of the spirit sea on the other side of the path also gradually returned to its original state. Lin Feng looked at Xianli and said, grasp it carefully. I'm not by your side. You can at most use 3 swords. Remember. Xianli's usually indifferent face showed a few rare changes. The corner of her lips twitched slightly. Her eyes revealed disappointment and sadness. Actually, it should be 2 swords, because one of them is already reserved. Lin Feng smiled and continued, don't be disappointed. If I'm not wrong, it won't take long for you to enjoy yourself, and you will be able to take another step forward. But before that, restrain yourself for the time being. 2 swords, remember. Hearing this, Xianli lowered her head towards Lin Feng. Her originally emotionless face, which was like a cold and exquisite doll, became a little gentler at this moment. Lin Feng looked at Shi Tianhao and Luo Qinggu on the other side and said, you two stay in the divine land. Don't be careless. Xiao Yan and Li Yuanfang were now in the Netherworld Sea, and the Yinghai Sea respectively. Shi Tianhao and Luo Qinggu both nodded in agreement. Lin Feng dusted his robe and walked up the stairs. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing also followed him. In addition to them, there was a white tiger with a cold metallic luster following him to the spirit sea. It was the white tiger great sage. At this moment, the white tiger great sage's body was flashing with a faint platinum radiance. His ice-cold, ferocious and murderous aura had disappeared. Apart from his outer appearance, he looked no different from an ordinary tiger. But even Zhu Yi and Wang Lin did not dare to look down on him, because at this moment, the white tiger great sage had passed the last tribulation and completely completed the first tribulation. He had entered the Dharma-ending realm. A pure-blooded white tiger who had entered the Dharma-ending realm was so powerful that he was one of the top big demons in the great Tianyuan world. This time, Lin Feng chose to bring the white tiger great sage to the spirit sea instead of staying in the vast thousand worlds. White Tiger Great Sage was very happy to do so. He might have some ideas about the Spirit Sea, but he would not have too many other ideas if there were no major changes when he traveled with Lin Feng. As long as Lin Feng did not fall, the White Tiger Great Sage would wholeheartedly serve Xianmen Tianzong. It was thanks to Xianmen Tianzong that he had been able to pass the last tribulation smoothly all these years. To him, entering the Spirit Sea was more likely to meet the powerhouses of the Yudu clan. Under the circumstances where he did not have to worry about the Spirit Sea, this was his biggest wish. The Blackboard world was hidden and hard to find. Even if the White Tiger Great Sage wanted to raid the Yudu clan's old home, he could not do so. So this time, entering the Spirit Sea with Lin Feng would give him a chance to fulfill his wish. The group of people passed through the invisible path and came to the door in the depths of the Cloud Sea. Then they entered in a single file. As soon as they entered the door, the vast and boundless spiritual energy, which seemed to have no end, surged toward them and surrounded them. There seemed to be something like ribbons of light in front of him, rising and falling, flashing in the void. The overly abundant spiritual energy even made one's senses numb. The scene in front of them looked rather ordinary, as if there was nothing special about it. Lin Feng and the others could not hear anything. The scene in front of them was filled with the mysterious concept of an invisible elephant, causing them to involuntarily immerse themselves in it. As expected, when Lin Feng and the others stepped into the Spirit Sea, the door behind them suddenly closed. A few rays of light flashed by, and 3 figures suddenly appeared in front of Lin Feng. One was a 90-foot-tall giant, which was the Nine Cheese clone. Another was a human figure dressed in silver-white scale armor with dragon horns on his head, which was the clone of Brontosaurus. The last one was a young man with vigorous vitality, which was the clone of the god of war. Beside Lin Feng, a tall figure also appeared in front of Zhu Yi. The vigorous vitality around him shook the void. It was his clone of Hao Yang. The Spirit Sea's great Tao returned to origin, which was mysterious and unpredictable, had now appeared again. At this moment, on the peak of White Cloud Mountain, Lord Taiwan was the leader. He closed his eyes and said slowly, "Let's move." A bright mirror hung high above his head, and it seemed to faintly resonate with the Spirit Sea. Behind him, Shoichi Dashin, Lord Xianwan, and Lin Daohan all nodded and followed. At this moment, in the Blackboard world, black light flowed in Sun Huan Yudu's eyes. He said solemnly, "The moment has finally arrived." Behind him, a group of strong Yudu clan stared at the void. Their gazes were complicated, but more than that, they were excited. As the laws of the Great Tao shook, more than one door opened, connecting the Spirit Sea and the universe. After opening, it closed again. Chapter 1384. Lin Feng was revisiting the spiritual sea. Apart from him, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others had also arrived. Even though they had heard Lin Feng describe the wonders of the spiritual sea, they still felt like their horizons had been widened when they put themselves in the spiritual sea. The White Tiger Great Sage had lived for a long time. He had been to the Empty Ocean, the Star Ocean, and even the Ying Ocean. However, he was still astonished when he entered the spiritual sea. Both humans and beasts could clearly sense the mysteries of the spiritual sea, especially when they comprehended the great Tao of heaven and earth that seemed to have taken shape and were like ribbons of light, which allowed them to compare with what they had learned in the past. Lin Feng said with a smile, "Take your time to figure it out, but don't stop. Follow me." He took the lead, while Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others quickly followed behind him. Within the Spirit Sea, there was no scenery, it was empty, as if there was no direction or boundary, nor was there any sense of distance. Walking within, the scenery around him did not change at all, making people feel as if they were always in the same place and not moving. But Lin Feng, who knew what was going on, had his hands behind his back, leisurely walking forward, not caring about this. The black and white Tai Chi pattern on his forehead flickered, while the Brontosaurus clone, the Divine Battle clone, and the Nine Chi clone turned into 3 rays of light and withdrew into the Tai Chi pattern. Zhu Yi also withdrew his Hao Yang clone and followed behind Lin Feng. However, Yi-Dao talismans appeared in his eyes, which flickered with intertwining lights. Each flicker represented an innumerable deduction. Wang Lin also followed behind Lin Feng with a calm expression. He did not ask where they were going, as he focused his attention on the great Tao in the spiritual sea. As they moved forward, Wang Lin's eyes flickered with brilliant lights, while his aura constantly changed. At times it was normal, and at other times, there was a strong surge of qi and blood. Compared to before, although Wang Lin's body was also exuding a powerful aura that shook the void, it only came from his head and torso. His arms and legs didn't reveal any aura at all, as if they were completely separated from his head and torso. Yu Hongyan's movements seemed ordinary, but with each step he took, his acupoints opened and closed. Each acupoint seemed to be connecting with him with the brilliance of the great Tao. As for Yang Qing's eyes, one of them was black while the other was white. However, the black and white were constantly changing. While the White Tiger Great Sage was observing the scenery of the spiritual sea, the White Tiger Great Sage's eyes became more dazzling. The cold metallic luster flowed endlessly like water. The more they moved forward, the more transparent light ribbons appeared. They gradually filled the void and intertwined with each other. But looking at these dense light ribbons, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others frowned. There seems to be a sense of disorder. It is not as mysterious and natural as the thousands of great Tao in the spiritual sea. These great Tao laws feel incomplete. Lin Feng smiled. Yes, it is. It is also because of this that the time it takes for us to refine the spiritual sea has been greatly reduced. Otherwise, there might not be much progress in thousands or even tens of thousands of years. He did not stop walking. As he spoke, he continued to move forward. The others followed behind him. After walking for an unknown period of time, they saw a faint flash of light at the end of the void. Everyone's eyes lit up. At the end of the world, there was a sea of light, covering everything, as if it had encompassed the entire world of the spiritual sea. The place under everyone's feet seemed to be the boundary between two different worlds. On one side was the empty world of the spiritual sea, and on the other side was an ocean composed entirely of light. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others subconsciously looked back. It was empty in front of them, and their vision was unobstructed. The concept of distance and space seemed to be completely non-existent. It seemed that things that were far away should be clearly visible. But in the world of the spiritual sea in front of them, there seemed to be only a group of people. Not only were the enchantress and the others nowhere to be seen, but the strong practitioners of the Taishu Temple and the great demons of the Yudu clan were also nowhere to be seen. Everyone turned back to look in front of them. There was a blur in front of them, and both their vision and consciousness were blocked. They could not see the scene in the spiritual sea at all. Seeing the confusion in Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others, Lin Feng said, "The others are on the other side of the spiritual sea. Everyone who enters this place through different doors will see the same scene in front of them. In the empty world, there seems to be only themselves, and they can't see the other people who entered the spiritual sea." Lin Feng's gaze also landed on the spiritual sea in front of them. Our sect, Taishu Temple, and the Yudu clan can easily find this place, but for people like the enchantress who only have the secret key, they will have to spend some effort to find this spiritual sea. Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and the Yudu clan had the highest possibility of obtaining the spiritual sea. This wasn't just empty talk, and it wasn't just a simple advantage in refining. Compared to the other powers that had entered the spiritual sea, Lin Feng and the others were ahead in all aspects. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others were deep in thought. The Yi-Dao talismans in Zhu Yi's eyes flashed continuously, and he felt the fog in front of him gradually dissipate. The scenes of light became clearer and clearer. This spiritual sea is the source of the light bands reflected by the incomplete great Tao in the spiritual sea. This is a damaged part of the spiritual sea. Whoever can repair this damage will have successfully refined the spiritual sea. Wang Lin looked at the sea of light in front of him, then at the spirit sea world behind him, and said in a low voice, "As the damage is gradually repaired, the sea of light in front of us will gradually disappear, and the space-time of the spirit sea world will also change accordingly. It is as if the different worlds will gradually merge and merge into one again. At that time, the different powers that have entered the spiritual sea will be able to interact with each other." His gaze turned slightly cold. At that time, the process of repairing the damage and eliminating the spiritual sea will also reach the final moment. That is the truly crucial moment. Yu Hongyan said. Therefore they can attack each other. The first to enter may not be able to laugh in the end, but the one who previously repaired the spiritual sea the most will still have the most advantage, and may even be able to use the power of the spiritual sea to suppress others to a certain extent. When experts fight, they only fight for a single line. Moreover, the power of the spiritual sea is vast and boundless. Even if it is only a small amount of power, it is still quite impressive. Yang Qing looked at Lin Feng. Master, when everyone works together to repair this spiritual sea, can they also wrestle with each other through the spiritual sea? That's right. As Lin Feng spoke, he had already stretched out his right hand and pressed it on the overwhelming and boundless light in front of him. Actually, it is not just a wrestling. Right now, the spiritual sea in front of us is different from the last time I entered. The method of repairing is different, and the characteristics are also different. As we wrestle with each other, we can even project our own power to a limited extent and fight with others in this spiritual sea. Of course, it is the same for the other people on the other side. At this moment, under the illumination of the light, Lin Feng's right hand seemed to be transparent. On that translucent jade-like palm, purple talismans and divine patterns continuously appeared, forming many incantations. Like meridians and bones, they flowed endlessly in Lin Feng's palm. However, that is after all a small path. In order to repair the spiritual sea in front of us, we have to focus on the spiritual sea itself. Lin Feng's left hand kept changing the incantation gestures. Taiji patterns rotated in his eyes, and a golden pearl that flashed with purple light appeared. It was the heavenly scarlet golden pearl. Large amounts of purple light surged out of the heavenly scarlet golden pearl, surging majestically and entering the spiritual sea in front of them. And above Lin Feng's head, the melodious sound of a bell rang in the void. It was as if the first existence that existed at the beginning of heaven and earth was playing out the changes of creation and the chaos of the universe. The bell of good fortune appeared above Lin Feng's head, and then landed beside Lin Feng. Above the ancient bell, a figure of light gradually appeared. It was a handsome middle-aged man with a jade-like face, a calm and reserved appearance. His temples were slightly stained with frost, and he was precisely the manifestation of the bell of good fortune's magic treasure origin spirit. The bell reverberated incessantly, condensing into ripples that seemed substantial. These ripples strengthened Lin Feng's body, and they followed him into the spiritual sea in front of them. Zhu Yi and Wang Lin also took a step forward. They each stretched out their palms and placed them on the boundless spiritual sea in front of them, immersing their minds in it. In the next moment, the two of them manifested their return to void Dharma bodies at the same time. Zhu Yi's 30-foot-tall return to void Dharma body held an ancient scroll in one hand and stretched out the other. The Tai Chi pattern on his forehead rotated incessantly, and a huge Tao-changing talisman hovered in the air above his head, flashing brilliantly. On the other hand, Wang Lin's return to void stage physique seemed to have changed from before. His limbs were like shadows of light, while his head and torso were jet black. He looked very similar to his great devil Lord Xian Sheng clone. The difference was on his forehead. Wang Lin's forehead was not like the great demon avatars, where there was a crack in demonic runes. Instead, there was a Taiji diagram that was no different from Zhu Yi's. Furthermore, Wang Lin's eyes were the same as before. They were like two sparkling crystals, like mirrors. Countless lights and shadows flickered on the surface of the mirror, displaying the past, present, and future. However, these things were constantly fluctuating between certainty and uncertainty, filled with a sense of absurdity and mystery. Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing also took a step forward and stretched out their palms to touch the spiritual sea. For them, although their cultivation levels could not be compared to their master and senior brother, they were still far beyond the reach of ordinary primordial spirit embodiment stage cultivators. To them, this sea of light was a rare experience that they could not afford to miss. White Tiger Great Sage did not step forward. Instead, he lay down quietly beside Lin Feng and watched them silently. As Lin Feng and the others moved, the sea of light in front of them gradually began to ripple, and the world of the spiritual sea behind them also began to surge with spiritual qi. Lin Feng's mind was connected with the Sea of Light at this moment. Everything in front of him was dazzling, and he could not see anything else. But soon, the scene gradually changed. In the boundless Sea of Light, Lin Feng could vaguely see a bright mirror light emerging, and at the same time, an illusory pitch-black sun slowly rising. Chapter 1385. Looking at the mirror light and the pitch-black sun, Lin Feng's lips curled into a faint smile. In the mirror light, white clouds could be faintly seen, and under the cover of the pitch-black sun, different colors of light could be seen flowing non-stop. That mirror light was naturally the light of the Haotian mirror, and that pitch-black sun was the manifestation of the demon power of the 12 illusory suns, the current clan master of Yudu race. At that moment, in the eyes of the people of Taishu Temple and the Yudu race, different scenes appeared. In the eyes of the people of Taishu Temple, there was also a pitch-black sun rising. Other than that, there was a purple auspicious cloud, and in the purple auspicious cloud, there seemed to be different scenes emerging. In the eyes of the strong practitioners of Yudu race, they saw the purple auspicious cloud and the bright mirror light. The three parties looked at the scene in front of them and knew that it was the result of the magic power or demon power of the opponent pouring into the Sea of Light. However, no matter if it was Lin Feng, the cultivators of Taishu Temple, or the Yudu race, they didn't attack each other first. Instead, they placed their attention on the Sea of Light in front of them. Under the guidance of their magic power divine arts, the boundless spirit qi in the spirit sea formed a huge wave that surged towards the Sea of Light. At that moment, the Sea of Light seemed to have become a bottomless abyss, swallowing all the spirit qi that surged in. Not even a wave could be made. However, the expressions of Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the rest changed slightly. They could faintly feel that the Sea of Light seemed to have dimmed slightly. In terms of spatial distance, the Sea of Light in front of them seemed to be slowly shrinking. The extent of its shrinking was very small, and the speed was very slow, but it was actually changing. Even the world of the spirit sea that everyone was in seemed to be changing. Streams of light that manifested from the great Tao stretched out from within and hung down like silk ribbons, wrapping around the bodies of Lin Feng and his disciple. These lights gave off a feeling of being incomplete, broken, and disorderly. However, as time passed, they gradually became complete again. Then they separated from everyone's bodies and drifted into the spirit sea in the distance. Then, they disappeared into the vast void without a trace. But between heaven and earth, the brilliance of the great path gradually became dazzling and indistinct. From the Sea of Light, a brand new brilliance of the great path would emerge and continue to wrap around Lin Feng and his disciple. Lin Feng and the others were already sitting cross-legged in the empty void, facing the seemingly boundless Sea of Light. At this moment, the bell of good fortune had already shed its original appearance. Instead, it had revealed its second manifestation, the River of Time. The huge ancient bell transformed into a gurgling river that flowed endlessly. It was long and full of vicissitudes. It was like the long river of time that washed over all things. The river of time surrounded Lin Feng and the others, flowing unceasingly. It was as if heaven and earth were changing because of it. The Sea of Light and the world of the spirit sea were like two different worlds. Under the operation of Lin Feng's supernatural power, the River of Time turned into a boundary, causing the world that Lin Feng and his disciple were in to seem to be separated from the spirit sea and the Sea of Light, becoming a third world. But this world was closely connected to the world of the spirit sea and the Sea of Light. The boundary between the boundaries was extremely blurred. The three seemed to form a mysterious balance, and they were mutually connected. As time passed, the appearance of the Sea of Light in front of Lin Feng gradually changed. The brilliance it emitted gradually turned purple. Streams of purple light constantly shuttled back and forth in the Sea of Light. Their number increased and they became denser and denser. The overall purple light also seemed to become thicker and thicker, as if it was going to dye the entire Sea of Light purple. At the same time, in the world of the spirit sea that the cultivators of Taishu Temple were in, the Sea of Light in front of them also gradually became like the light of a Haotian mirror. It was clear and tranquil, without any waves. It was like the surface of a mirror. Meanwhile, the sea of light in front of the strong practitioners of Yudu race was dyed black. In the black sea of light, large amounts of god markings appeared, as if there were bubbles rising in the water. Lin Feng's eyes were closed, and his expression was at ease. He could feel that his side, Taishu Temple, and Yudu race were all using their own supernatural power and willpower to infect the sea of light in front of them. Meanwhile, the sea of light that represented the gap in the spirit sea was gradually shrinking in size. In the sea of light, in the center of the area that the three sides occupied, there was a core that was also forming, turning from illusion to reality. From an illusory level, it was transitioning into something real. In the center of his area, a purple auspicious cloud was gradually growing. The auspicious cloud was becoming more and more condensed, becoming more and more real. Even though it still looked like an illusory cloud without a fixed form, it was already an existence that had stepped into the real world. The area that the three sides occupied continued to expand, and the borders of the areas were also gradually getting closer. In Lin Feng's consciousness, the 8 trigrams had laid down the foundation of creation. The 4 elements of earth, water, fire, and wind were in a mess, and then they stabilized once again, deducing the phenomenon of creation. Everything transformed into the path of yin and yang, one black and one white flowing continuously. The path of creation alternated between going forward and going backward, repeating the cycle. On top of his head, a light shadow lit up. It seemed to be only 3 yards in radius, like a canopy, but there were all kinds of principles deduced within, making it too much for the eyes to take in. Billions of formation markings interweaved continuously, and it was the formation of yin and yang life and death. In the formation of yin and yang life and death, there was a huge and majestic palace that looked like the residence of a god king in the heavens. It was shrouded in layers of light, and even if one couldn't see it clearly, one could feel the overbearing and awe-inspiring concept of power within. The Taiji diagram on Lin Feng's forehead spun continuously, and streams of light poured out from it, landing in the sea of light in front of him. As time passed, the aura on his body became more and more profound, giving people a feeling that it was unfathomable. And the river of time that flowed around his body also became more and more profound. The direction of the river could not be seen, and its source could not be identified. It was as if it was engraved in time, and it was difficult to define its length and position. But there was a middle-aged man sitting in the river, giving people a feeling that this man was sitting in the middle of the river of time. No matter how much time flowed, he would not move. This man was the original spirit of the Bell of Fate, Fate Creation Boy. But at this moment, it was difficult to call him a boy. Not only did he look like a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s, but his appearance was still changing, and he was slowly aging. As Lin Feng and the others continued to replenish and refine the spiritual sea, time continued to pass. In the end, although Fate Creation Boy was still wearing a black and white Taoist robe, his appearance had changed into that of an old man. Although he looked thin and hale and hearty, his hair and beard were all white, and he looked old. Only his eyes contained many characteristics of an infant, a teenager, and a middle-aged man at the same time, making it impossible to tell his age. Beside Lin Feng, his disciples were also gradually changing. Zhu Yi manifested his Dharmakaya of void return. He looked calm and peaceful, but the golden bridge of the Nirvana realm had already appeared below him. On the golden bridge, many lights and shadows gradually emerged, and they were all sages and great scholars from ancient times to the present. The sound of reading was endless, and gradually, it was no longer limited to the sound of reading. It became more and more noisy, and all kinds of voices could be heard. But the golden bridge of the Nirvana realm's magnificent willpower and spirit became purer and more condensed. Besides the original 8 halos on the golden bridge of the Nirvana realm, the 9th halo also began to appear slowly. On the other side, Wang Lin's change was even more obvious. His mirror-like eyes became more and more dazzling, and his head gradually began to change back to the original Dharmakaya of void return. It was no longer like the incarnation of the great devil, which exuded a strong power of qi and blood that was like the life and death of the universe from his acupoints. His torso was also showing the same changes, But all the power of qi and blood was converging towards a point in his body, and that was where his heart was. When Wang Lin's Dharmakaya of void return was first formed, his heart was in the shape of his spiritual power mystique, Emperor Yan's hall. But now Wang Lin stood in the void, his forelimbs spread out. His left leg turned into layers of light, and within the light, there was a huge black palace. It was Emperor Yan's hall. The doors of Emperor Yan's hall opened, and other than the two wheels of light, one black and one white, there was a figure sitting on the throne. He was wearing a black dragon robe and had a flat crown on his head, just like the Lord of Hell. That figure had the same facial features as Wang Lin, but he was cold and dignified, and looked down on all life. On his forehead, there was a vertical demonic mark, just like the incarnation of the great devil. On the other side, Wang Lin's right leg also turned into layers of light, and within the light, there was a black stone bridge. It seemed to have existed since ancient times, and would never be destroyed. The bridge connected life and death, ghosts and gods, yin and yang, and heaven and earth. On the stone bridge, a man in green stood. He looked ordinary and leisurely, but he also looked like Wang Lin. It was just that compared to the Lord of Hell and Emperor Yan's hall, this Wang Lin looked much kinder. He had a smile on his face, and the only thing that stood out was that there was also a vertical demonic mark on his forehead. Wang Lin's left and right hands respectively turned into the Yellow Springs Road, and the River of Forgetfulness. On the road and in the river, there was also a Wang Lin. The Wang Lin on the road did not look like an adult, but a youth stubborn and ordinary and walked alone. The Wang Lin in the river was expressionless, his eyes closed. He was like a stubborn rock in the Yellow Springs River, motionless and silent. And these two Wang Lins also had a vertical demonic mark on their foreheads. The head of Wang Lin, who had manifested his void return physique, was no longer emitting any power of qi and blood. Instead, it was gradually turning into a hazy glow. In that glow, the mirror-like stone of 3 lives flickered and gradually took shape. In the spirit sea, there were 3 parties fighting, but there was no anger. However, everyone knew that this was just the calm before the storm. Very quickly new changes occurred. Whether it was Lin Feng and his disciple, or the people of Taishu Temple, and the experts of the Yudu tribe, all of them felt it. Others had already come to the shore of the Sea of Light and interacted with it. Chapter 1386. Lin Feng closed his eyes, and a different scene appeared in his sea of consciousness. Apart from the bright mirror light and the pitch-black sun, a dark cloud appeared. The cloud stretched and changed, gradually expanding, and evolving from an illusory shadow to a real cloud. Soon after, a golden brilliance flashed. As the golden brilliance condensed, it gradually turned into a Buddha, filling the surroundings as if it was everywhere. However, unlike the rapidly expanding dark clouds, the changes to the Buddha didn't seem to be obvious. When Lin Feng saw this scene, his heart stirred slightly. Future glazed Buddha, what is he thinking? The dark cloud was naturally the manifestation of the enchantress's demonic power divine sense, while the Buddha's shadow was the projection of the future glazed Buddha's dharmic power divine sense. According to the news circulating in the Tianyuan Great World, the dragon race's secret key to the spirit sea was obtained from Golden Cicada. As for Golden Cicada, not long after the future glazed Buddha was born in the war between the two worlds, he had gone to the east to meet the Buddha. With the future glazed Buddha's help to conceal the karma and heavenly secrets, Golden Cicada's whereabouts became even more secretive, making it difficult for others to find him. Not only could the other demons not find him, even with Lin Feng's help and the Golden Cicada's rope in hand, the monkey, who had previously chased Golden Cicada to the point where he could only flee, could not find any traces of Golden Cicada. He could only give up gloomily. Lin Feng had always felt that there was something strange about the dragon race being able to intercept Golden Cicada. Now it seemed even more intriguing. The future glazed Buddha had at least 2 of the secret keys to the spirit sea. And from that Buddha silhouette, even though it's hard to tell just what level he's reached right now, Lin Feng can faintly feel that ever since he was born, the future Buddha Lord's strength has always been rapidly increasing. His cultivation level has already caught up to his current body. The future body of the Buddha was supposed to be in existence even more powerful than his current body. The mysterious and unfathomable part of it was to subdue the Dharma and establish the Dharma. However, the actual combat aspect of this technique, the birth of a future self, was not something that could be easily achieved. Even the Buddha himself had to transform the past, future, and present into the heavens and earth in order to achieve this. Furthermore, because of Lin Feng, there were some deviations. As a result, it was very difficult for this future body of the Buddha to truly surpass his current body. But even with that being the case, the current future constellation glazed Buddha Master was far from comparable to when he had first been born. However, his current actions were rather abnormal. The future glazed Buddha Master didn't seem to care about the spirit sea that everyone was fighting for. Instead, he seemed to be patiently waiting for something. Lin Feng frowned slightly and opened his eyes. His pupils were like the deep universe, and there were rays of light constantly intertwining and flickering in them. Although he had the key to the spiritual sea, the possibility that the Yuan Dragon King had not entered the spiritual sea was within Lin Feng's expectations. The spiritual ocean was of utmost importance, but it was not impossible for the Dragon Clan to choose to enter the Divine Land and sweep through the Great Qin Empire. Although the Great Qin Empire had the intention to hide Shi Xingyun's situation, and Xianmen Tianzong didn't make it public, the news still spread. Her mother and brother, Shi Chongyun, were both in the Great Qin Empire. If the Great Qin Empire was in danger, Shi Xingyun would most likely choose to rush to West Hill City. Compared to the Great Qin Empire, she was the Dragon Clan's primary target. However, it wouldn't be easy for the Dragon Clan to have their way if Xianli stayed in the Divine Land. If they wanted to succeed, they would need a lot of planning. Seeing that things couldn't be done, the Yuan Dragon King would still choose to enter the spiritual ocean. As Lin Feng was thinking, he suddenly had a thought. In his divine sense, he suddenly saw a ball of light appearing in the sea of light in front of him. Looking closely, the ball of light was like a stubborn rock that existed in the void. It was difficult to tell which direction was up, down, left, and right. This stubborn rock gave off a feeling that it was indestructible and would never yield. It looked like a rock that didn't move, but it exuded a rebellious and lawless spirit. This feeling, is it that monkey? Lin Feng's eyes narrowed. He's here too. At this moment, in one of the worlds in the spiritual ocean, a human-sized figure that looked like an ordinary monkey stood up and stood alone in front of the sea of light. This monkey stretched out a furry claw and pressed it on the sea of light in front of him. At the same time, he looked around and sized up the spiritual ocean behind him. A smile appeared on his furry face. Interesting, interesting. This place is interesting. Let me have some fun too. The others who were trying to refine the spiritual ocean also paid attention to that stubborn rock and felt the demonic power within it. Some people found it very unfamiliar and couldn't figure it out for a while. Others reacted like Lin Feng. It's that infinite law inner monkey? Although the monkey hadn't appeared in the world for a long time, and every time he did, it was like a startled swan. However, the commotion he caused was not small. In the past few years, he had been chasing after golden cicada everywhere, turning the entire vast Tianhuang land upside down. There was no peace. However, no one was happy about his participation, including Lin Feng. This is a completely unstable factor. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows slightly. Although he had helped the monkey remove the band-tightening curse back then, and the two of them had formed some good karma, even if the monkey wanted to return the favor, it would not be on a matter like the Battle of the Spiritual Ocean. On the contrary, if Lin Feng gained the upper hand in refining the spiritual ocean, then the monkey was more likely to cause trouble and obstruct him. This had nothing to do with favors. No matter who it was difficult to sit back and watch Xianmen Tianzong, who had occupied the Divine Land, and was almost the #1 force in the Tianyuan school, refine the spiritual ocean. Not to mention that the monkey is a person who is used to being wild. Even if he has the intention to help Lin Feng, it's hard to say what the result will be. Lin Feng shook his head and continued to focus on filling up the sea of light. Although the others were secretly paying attention to the monkey's arrival, they did not stop what they were doing. Now was not the time to fight. Before the real fight, Everyone should first accumulate the chips in their hands and seize the upper hand. Beside Lin Feng, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others also sensed the monkey's arrival. After a slight change in their expressions, they calmed down and focused on the matter at hand. The ninth circle of light on the Permitha Golden Bridge under Zhu Yi's feet became clearer and more condensed. As for the head of Wang Lin's void return body, it had completely turned into layers of light. Within the light, an existence that resembled the three-life stone was gradually taking shape. Within the three-life stone, three figures were gradually reflected. They seemed to be fused together, but they seemed to be in three different time and space, respectively in the past, present, and future. Wang Lin's torso also turned into light and shadow, and there was no longer exuding exuberant qi and blood. All the qi and blood power that originated from the great devil avatar was now gathered at his heart. At this moment, every beat of Wang Lin's heart was like the creation of a universe, from creation to destruction. An extremely majestic power was emitted from it. That pitch-black heart seemed to contain the extreme evils of the universe, causing one's heart to palpitate and fear involuntarily. Beside Zhu Yi and Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan sat cross-legged. One of her hands reached forward to touch the sea of light, while the other hand formed a seal and placed her palm vertically on her chest. The spots of light that flickered on her body were not attached to the outside. Instead, they were emitted from within her body. Those spots of light were like spots of starlight that flickered continuously, shooting out from the acupoints all over Yu Hongyan's body. Every acupoint was like a star that flickered with shocking light continuously. They contained the majestic qi and blood power of the physical body that was as great as the power of the stars. With every breath that Yu Hongyan took, the starlight flickered, and her power seemed to increase. As time passed, the strength of the qi and blood of Yu Hongyan's physical body was actually close to the state that Shi Tianhao had when he was at the peak of the primordial soul incarnation realm. Before Shi Tianhao, there had never been a human martial adept who had ever reached such a height. Yang Qing's aura seemed to be much more tranquil. Similarly, she sat cross-legged in the void. Black and white intertwined and circulated in her eyes. Around her body, there were also two clouds, one black and one white, constantly rotating. This scene was somewhat similar to the powerful adepts of the Taishu Temple after they had cultivated the void yin-yang way to the great success stage. But the concept of power and the aura of spiritual power were different. On the surface of Yang Qing's body, there was a faint layer of purple light that was bright and translucent like a crystal. The Tai Chi pattern on his forehead was constantly rotating. The sea of light continued to churn and roar, and its scale was gradually shrinking. In the sea of light, the areas occupied by the various forces were constantly getting closer, until finally, they gradually connected. The spiritual qi in the spirit sea heaven and earth continued to gather, pouring into the sea of light. The scene in front of everyone in different worlds was the same. The void was constantly changing, and different worlds were about to overlap. When the spiritual qi tide subsided, the sea of light would also collapse to its limit. At the same time, the void of the heavens and earth would merge, and everyone would be gathered together. But before the spiritual qi tide completely subsided, in the sea of light, the various forces that had already come into contact with each other, and had long been waiting for this moment, broke the silence at the same time. A violent storm broke out in an instant. Everyone wanted to take advantage of this final moment to seize the initiative as much as possible. The pitch-black sun was the first to shine brightly. The black sunlight shrouded the heavens and spread out in all directions. The purple auspicious cloud formed by Lin Feng's spiritual power and consciousness, the bright mirror light formed by the Taishu Temple, the stubborn stone formed by the monkey's demonic power and consciousness, and the dark cloud formed by the enchantress's demonic power and consciousness, all spread out in all directions at the same time. And among all these forces, the most eye-catching one was the bright mirror light that belonged to the Taishu Temple. A bright mirror hung high in the void, illuminating the entire sea of light. Streams of light seemed to be emitted from the edges of the mirror light, spreading out in all directions. And in the sea of light, streams of light also appeared and merged with the mirror light, causing the mirror light to seem to be the center of the entire sea of light. Chapter 1387. The biggest problem with the premature opening of the Spirit Sea to Taishu Temple was that the Haotian mirror still couldn't be restored to perfection. But even so, the Haotian mirror in the Spirit Sea displayed a much stronger power than when it was in the vast thousand worlds. Rays of the Great Tao were added to the bright mirror light, causing the Haotian mirror to be like the core of the Spirit Sea. Vaguely, there were signs of the Spirit Sea being activated. Lin Feng, Sun Mirage, Yudu, and the others, who had some understanding of the Haotian mirror, weren't surprised by this. Even if they didn't consider the characteristics of the Haotian mirror, at this moment, everyone was working together to fill in the gap of the Spirit Sea, which was like a sea of light. The area occupied by Taishu Temple was the largest, with one sect occupying nearly half of it. Although the Spirit Sea had been closed the last time, among the three sects, Xianmen Tianzong, Yudu Race, and Taishu Temple undoubtedly had more opportunities. At this moment, these advantages were directly displayed. In the Battle of the Spirit Sea, the past grudges and factions were no longer accurate. At this moment, whoever had a greater advantage would be the common opponent of the others, and the others would naturally form an alliance based on common interests. Thus, almost at the same time, the huge black sun, the dark clouds that covered the sky, and the stubborn rocks attacked the bright mirror light at the same time. Lord Tai and the others were clearly prepared for this. Although the pressure was great, they didn't panic and calmly dealt with it. The brilliance of the mirror light suddenly converged, becoming quiet and deep. Wherever the brilliance flowed, it first shrouded the huge black sun. The huge black sun that was shown by the mirror light instantly seemed to be frozen in time and space, forcibly fixed in place. The mirror light flowed faintly, and the light of the outside sea of light overflowed in all directions. Only the huge black sun didn't move, forming a sharp contrast with the surrounding scenery. The light spots around the black sun, and the raging flames also stopped at this moment, like a statue. Soon after, the motionless black sun was like a real statue that had experienced the long passage of time. It began to decay and turn into sand. Its surface was peeling off, and it was about to collapse. At this moment, there seemed to be a long howl in the Spirit Sea. The black sun suddenly accelerated its collapse, and rays of terrifying black light shot out from it, causing the surrounding Great Tao to tremble and wail. The black sun that was covered by the Haotian mirror became alive again. Although it had shrunk in size, the light it emitted was even more dazzling. But as it changed, the faint mirror light became even more mysterious and unfathomable. Under the guidance of an invisible force, the great Taos in his spiritual sea began to converge toward the mirror light and fuse with it. Countless images were faintly discernible amidst the flowing light of the Grand Tao. They didn't reveal a specific object, and they revealed various principles and concepts instead. Some were simple and ordinary, some were profound and obscure. With the support of the Great Tao, wherever the mirror light shrouded, the space suddenly began to expand rapidly, and time seemed to be flowing backward. Under the illumination of the mirror light, the black sun seemed to be stretched and extended continuously, and it was about to return to its previous size. And in this process, the vitality of the black sun seemed to decrease again, and it was about to return to its previous solidified state. At the same time, the dark clouds formed by the enchantress's demonic consciousness had already floated above the Haotian mirror. The dark clouds covered the sun, and the mirror light seemed to dim a little, and the rock formed by the monkey's demonic consciousness instantly passed through the layers of light, and like a comet, it struck toward the center of the Haotian mirror. Its momentum seemed to want to shatter the mirror. However, the Haotian mirror flashed faintly, and the rock passed through the dim light. It was as if the profound and majestic mirror that had frozen the black sun was an illusion. And under the cover of the dark clouds that covered the sky, the mirror light was not affected at all. It was as if both parties were in different space-time. Seeing this scene, Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. It's indeed extraordinary. It's really rare for someone with the monkey's and the enchantress's cultivation to be able to use the changes in space-time to cause them to misjudge. However, the monkey and the enchantress were not easy to deal with. After missing their attack, they immediately reacted. At the next moment, a light shadow appeared on the rock formed by the monkey's demonic consciousness. The light shadow kept on changing, showing the images of the candle dragon, Zhu Yan, the great golden-winged roc, the Hui dragon, the white jade dragon, and many other great demons. As the light shadow changed, those great demons seemed to be indistinguishable from one another. They fused as one, and the various powers of time and space were augmented. They fused with the roc and then struck toward the Haotian mirror once again. On the other side, streams of light also emerged from the dark clouds formed by the heavenly charmer saint's demonic power and divine sense. 12 beams of light could be vaguely seen lighting up, and then they condensed into 4 extremely dazzling beams of light, almost breaking through the area covered by the dark clouds. Under the support of the 4 light pillars, the dark clouds instantly became even more ethereal and illusory. It was as if they existed in countless different spacetime, and were omnipresent, descending toward the Haotian mirror. The Haotian mirror's light turned from deep and dark to bright and dazzling once again. Streams of mirror light spread out from within. Each stream of mirror light shone in midair, and suddenly refracted in a different direction in the void, as if there was another mirror there. The refraction of the mirror light became increasingly faster. Then one Haotian mirror after another really appeared in the void. Each mirror light was gathering the radiance of the great Tao of the Spirit Sea to augment it. The illusory mirror light began to materialize. Streams of light crisscrossed, causing the sea of light before them to be almost filled by the Haotian mirror's mirror light. Everyone present frowned slightly. The Spirit Sea seems to be the Haotian mirror's home ground. It's indeed a Dharma treasure born from the great thousand world. It already has some of the power of a perfected Dharma treasure. Although it was facing the threat of Monkey and the Enchantress, more and more mirror light gathered on the Black Sun. It kept increasing its power, wanting to shatter it first. The Black Sun was enveloped by the increasingly intense mirror light, and its body kept expanding. Its body grew larger and larger, but the power aura within it grew weaker. The area of the sea of light that had been enveloped by the black sunlight gradually faded, and was contaminated by the mirror light. Numerous black talisman markings appeared and connected together, transforming into numerous divine command incantations that formed a ring that revolved around the black sun without stopping. In the black sun, streams of divine light surged, shaking the heavens and the earth. It stabilized its body and resisted the mirror light. As the mirror light crisscrossed, the rock that was blocked suddenly revealed a violent and ferocious aura, as if it had been enraged. Not only did the shadows of great demons flicker on the rock, but cracks actually appeared on the surface of the rock. In the cracks, a pair of blood-red eyes flashed in the darkness like 2 bloody red suns. A light figure condensed with the rock as the center, turning into a ferocious golden monkey that stood tall. Its feet stepped on the heaven and earth, and its head was above the universe. Its body was extremely huge. An incomparably violent chi and blood surged from its body. With a wave of its hand, a thick iron rod that looked like a pillar that supported the heavens appeared. That was not the end. 2 strands of hair fell from the back of the golden monkey's neck. They grew with the wind and instantly turned into 2 identical monkeys. The 3 golden monkeys bared their teeth at the mirror light that filled the sky. Then they jumped in the void, and the 3 huge bodies collided with each other. They instantly combined and turned into one body that had 3 heads and 6 arms. With this combination, the 4 empty arms shook, and the huge iron rod that was formed by the Rui divine iron mine actually had 2 more arms. Behind the golden monkey with 3 heads and 6 arms, the shadows of the candle dragon, Hundun, golden winged roc, and many other great demons flashed and became clearer. Grow, grow, grow. The 3 heads of the giant monkey shouted together majestically. The 3 thick iron rods swept across the sea of light, shattering the endless radiance and piercing the white sea of clouds. The Haotian mirror that was formed by the mirror light was instantly shattered by the monkey. Facing such a ferocious monkey, everyone present couldn't help but raise their brows. Did this monkey experience a tribulation? It only passed one tribulation, and it shouldn't have completely passed the tribulation's weak period. Why is it so violent? The monkey's abilities surpassed most people's expectations, but no one was happy. The Haotian mirror was executed here, and to a certain extent, it was compatible with the great Tao of the Spirit Sea, so there was no need to worry. However, this monkey was too unbridled. If it continued to fight like this, it wouldn't be able to completely fix the flaw in the spirit sea. If it wasn't careful, it might be torn apart again. The huge black sun shone, and in the sunlight, a figure could be faintly seen. Then, circles after circles of black light spread out in all directions, shaking the mirror light that fixed him in place. These black mysterious lights were the terrifying Yudu Xianhua of Mirage Sun Yudu. However, under the control of Mirage Sun Yudu, the Yudu Xianhua wasn't as violent as before. Instead, it was like a tidal wave that formed a region in the void and fixed the world of the Sea of Light in place. The mirror light and the black light collided continuously, shattering one after another. Meanwhile, the area of the dark clouds that the enchantress transformed into became larger and larger, surrounding the Haotian mirror, and blocking the intersecting mirror light that extended out. Although the mirror light continued to pierce through the clouds, it was sluggish as it flowed. In this situation, the golden monkey on the other side raised his 1,000-pound cudgel and shattered the illusory mirror. A soft sigh seemed to come from the Haotian mirror, and the mirror light turned to aim at the monkey. Under the circulation of the mirror light, the monkey's extremely violent movements finally slowed down. It was as though he was about to be fixed in the void. But at this moment, the body in the huge black sun completely solidified. Mirage Sun Yudu walked out from the huge black sun and swallowed it. The triangular radiance on the top of his head flowed, and a terrifying black mysterious light burst forth, striking towards the Haotian mirror. As the mirror light of the Haotian mirror swirled, it once again fought against the terrifying Yudu Xianhua. However, the monkey on the other side had already raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl. With a leap, he traversed through the world and jumped out of the range of the mirror light. His 3 divine metal cudgels smashed towards the same point under the immense force. This strike was vigorous as though it was going to shatter heaven and earth. Its target was the true center of the Haotian mirror, which was also his target all along. Lin Feng looked at the sight in front of his eyes, and at the same time, he was also paying attention to the light shadow of the Buddha in the Sea of Light that had never moved. Chapter 1388. Silently, the Buddha's light shadow stayed in a corner of the Sea of Light. It didn't take the opportunity to expand the area it occupied, nor did it attack anyone. It was as if there was no movement at all. This slightly abnormal action, apart from Lin Feng, the other people fighting actually also more or less split some of their attention, paying attention to it. However, if the future star-glazed Buddha master didn't take the initiative to interfere in the battle, the others wouldn't find trouble with him for the time being. The monkey might still be thinking about him and Golden Cicada, but at this moment, the Haotian mirror undoubtedly attracted his attention. It manifested 3 heads and 6 arms, and the 3 divine metal rods hit the same point together. Before they hit their target, that point formed a black hole, causing everything in the surroundings to collapse towards that point. It was as if a hole had appeared in the entire world, producing a huge suction force. Everything in the world was about to be sucked out of this hole. Facing the monkey's violent attack, the Haotian mirror, which had its attention drawn by the sun Mirage Yudu, flowed with rays of light. They stacked layer by layer, forming something that looked like a crystal, wrapping the entire treasure mirror inside out. The monkey's 3 rods merged into one, and this point struck the crystal on the outer layer of the Haotian mirror. The surface of the crystal instantly cracked a little, and the surrounding crystals started to shatter, being pulled towards that black point. However, at this moment, a colorless and formless light shot out from that black point, sweeping up the light ribbons formed by the logic of the great Tao in the surrounding Sea of Light. They gathered together and bombarded the monkey's metal rods. The monkey was knocked back, and 2 of the 3 divine metal rods in his hands broke. The crystal shell surrounding the Haotian mirror completely shattered, revealing the original appearance of the Haotian mirror. At the center of the treasure mirror, a colorless and formless divine light was as thin as a strand of hair, but it flowed in the void, causing the radiance of the great Tao in the spirit sea to shake the heaven and earth. It resisted another beam of Yudu profound splendor from the sun Mirage Yudu on the other side. However, the radiance of the clear sky mirror was slightly dimmer than it was at the beginning. The area of the Sea of Light that was covered by the mirror light also gradually shrunk. The light and shadow of Yudu seemed to have produced two huge black suns in its left and right eyes. And the area of the ocean of light that was occupied by the sunlight started to expand. Lin Feng glanced at the Buddha's silhouette and didn't say anything. He used his mind to control the purple cloud that was formed from his magic power and consciousness, and spread it towards other areas of the Sea of Light. The purple auspicious clouds rolled like a boiling purple sea of clouds. They spread for millions of miles and instantly covered the Sea of Light. However, the first target chosen by the purple chi was not the Taishu temple, which had the most advantage in the field. Instead, it abruptly covered the dark cloud formed by the enchantress's demonic power divine sense. The low, hoarse voice of the enchantress came from the dark clouds. Master of the celestial sect of wonders, are you still concerned about the difference between the human clan and the demon clan? Lin Feng didn't mind and smiled. What do you think? As they spoke, Zhang Xian's movements did not slow down at all. Surging purple aura swept out, and wherever it went, the dark clouds would be forced back. In the purple sea of clouds, there were many Taiji diagrams, big and small, circling together. In the center of each Taiji diagram, there seemed to be a Taoist sitting upright, both hands forming a mudra. Rays of resplendent light undulated in the void. As they undulated, they seemed to be guiding the ribbons of light formed by the great Tao of heaven and earth in the Sea of Light. The ribbons of light formed by the great Tao of heaven and earth hung down like silk ribbons and landed on the Taiji diagrams. As the Taiji diagrams rotated, they merged with the Taoist in the center of the Taiji diagrams. Not only did the enchantress frown at the sight of this scene, but even the people of Taishu Temple, the Yudu clan, and even the monkey who were fighting fiercely at the side were attracted to it. The Haotian mirror is the treasure of heaven and earth born from the great heaven primordial world. It's an existence like the sun of the great Kiliacosm, so it's not strange for it to be able to guide the flow of light formed by the great Tao of heaven and earth in the spirit sea. However, this master of the celestial sect of wonders is completely because of himself. What is he relying on? He perfected the path of karma of Buddhism, opened a forum to give lectures, and enlightened other sections. Could it be that his orthodoxy is really so miraculous? As the enchantress thought to herself, the dark clouds formed by her demonic power consciousness flew backward, not coming into contact with Lin Feng's rolling purple chi. The scene in front of her was beyond her expectations. Even though she still had some strength left, the Lin Feng in front of her was even more unfathomable. As the enchantress retreated, the 4 dazzling pillars of light in the dark clouds dispersed again, turning into 12 pillars of light. Then, the demonic aura of these 12 pillars of light suddenly changed, turning into 4 pillars of light again. However, the concept of power within them was completely different from before. The concept of power of the 4 great demon races Phoenix, Black Tortoise, Qilin, and Juezheng surged forth, causing the area covered by the dark clouds to feel indestructible. Although under the pressure of Lin Feng's purple chi, she retreated step by step, she did not panic. Little by little, she maintained the area of the Sea of Light that she had occupied, so that she would not be swept out by Lin Feng as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. As the area covered by the enchantress's dark clouds continued to shrink, her power also became more condensed, and her defense became stronger. But Lin Feng smiled faintly. Amidst the rolling purple gas, beams of light continuously emerged, turning into a world of pure light. The light seemed to be endless, also forming a sea of light. It was different from the sea of light of the great path that everyone was currently in, but it was constantly merging. This was indeed the yin and yang life and death formation controlled by Lin Feng, which had launched the changes of the 2 extremes. In the world of pure light, a majestic palace appeared. Beams of purple and gold radiance filled the air, causing the expansion of the world of pure light to become even more domineering and heavy. With the palace as the center, the scenery in the world of pure light gradually changed. Endless radiance turned into all kinds of scenery, heaven and earth, nature. Mountains, plains, rivers, lakes, grasslands, deserts, all gradually took shape, together forming a new world. In this world, Majestic cities rose from the ground, turning into a kingdom of light. Countless lights and shadows appeared, and figures flickered, forming farmers in the fields, hunters in the mountains, peddlers in the cities, scholars and officials. Everything was centered on the palace of the divine king in the sky that was flashing with purple and gold radiance. All living beings in the world worshipped it, and thousands of celestial fairies shuttled through it, holding nectar in their hands. Shadows of celestials came from all directions to pay homage. Endless purple and gold radiance filled the air, making this kingdom of light seem indestructible and eternal. The territory of the kingdom kept expanding in all directions. At the edge of this kingdom of light, there were countless celestial gods and celestial generals, divine soldiers and powerful horses, leading the way for the kingdom to expand. The entire kingdom of light was born from the billowing purple chi. Then, with the help of the purple chi, it kept pressing toward the area occupied by the enchantress in the sea of light. The enchantress took a deep breath, and the dark clouds once again shrank by a large margin. The area it occupied became narrower, but its defense was stronger. Has the Grand Imperial Palace finally been subdued by the master of the celestial sect? How can the concept of power that I am supreme submit to others? The path of the master of the celestial sect is not like the Grand Emperor, who controls the Imperial Tao. While pressuring the enchantress to retreat, Lin Feng's spiritual power and consciousness continued to expand to other places. And at this moment, the image in the Haotian mirror shook slightly. Outside the Sea of Light, the world of the Spirit Sea where everyone in the Taishu Temple was also constantly changing. The world twisted and overlapped, and it was about to merge with the space-time of the Spirit Sea where everyone else was. In this world, there was no one, only a huge ball of light. The ball of light was divided into 9 layers, showing different scenes. And in these 9 layers, every layer was occupied by a figure. The highest layer was indescribable, and in the indescribable mysterious light sat an elder in white. His eyes were tightly shut, and he was none other than Tao Venerable Supreme Unity. Tao Venerable Supreme Unity frowned. The master of the celestial sect has forced back the enchantress for the center of the Sea of Light occupied by our temple's Haotian mirror. In the Sea of Light, billowing purple chi filled the air, covering the sky and covering the earth. But in the process of traveling through the mysterious space-time, the purple chi displayed a strange posture. It actually compressed and condensed into a line, piercing through the area covered by the light of the Haotian mirror. From a strange direction, it approached the Haotian mirror. At the same time, Monkey and Yudu had already attacked again. The Haotian mirror shone brightly, and rays of mirror light covered the sky, transforming into rings of light. Within the area covered by the rings of light, time and space seemed to be completely frozen. Anyone who stepped into the rings of light, no matter if it was Monkey, Mirage Sun, Yudu, or Lin Feng, their movements became sluggish. The closer they got to the inside, the more rings of light they passed through, and the sluggish their movements became. It wasn't just consciousness magic power. Outside the Sea of Light, even the true bodies of Lin Feng and the rest, who were in different spirit seas, felt their thoughts becoming slower and slower, as if they were about to be frozen. But right after, a layer of mysterious light appeared on the periphery of the purple chi in the Sea of Light. It was as if the river of time was flowing, intersecting with the purple chi. Instantly, it broke free from the shroud of the mirror light, and continued to rush towards the Haotian mirror. On the other side, the body that Mirage Sun and Yudu's demon power and consciousness had manifested in the Sea of Light also gave off a low growl, and a resplendent black light shot out from the heart of his brows. In the Sea of Light, the wails of the great Tao rang out incessantly, and the terrifying black light instantly pierced through the outer rings of the Haotian mirror. The monkey didn't remove his 3-headed and 6-armed form, and he continued to shout towards the sky. The light shadows of the other life forms above his head all vanished, and only a huge blue-eyed white monkey was left. Then he suddenly leaped, and his 6 arms grabbed onto the remaining divine metal cudgel. That divine metal cudgel became even larger, and its aura became even fiercer. With the momentum of trampling on the sky, it smashed towards the Haotian mirror. Facing this heavy attack, the Haotian mirror's light flashed, and it was shattered by the combined forces of the three parties. But in another place that seemed to be so close yet so far away, light gathered, and the Haotian mirror appeared once again. It was just that at this moment, it was already forced to leave its original position. Chapter 1389. The Haotian mirror seemed to be connected to the heavens, and was above all spacetime. It was omnipresent and hard to destroy. Even though it was shattered by the combined efforts of the three parties, it was only the Haotian mirror in this layer of spacetime that shattered. It quickly appeared in another layer of spacetime, and it was extremely mysterious. With just one shattering, the Haotian mirror's light dimmed slightly, and it was forced to leave the position it had occupied previously. Before this, not only did the Taishu Temple occupy the largest area in the Sea of Light, but because of the Haotian mirror's miraculousness, it affected the Great Tao and occupied the center of the Sea of Light. By retreating this time, it also gave up the center of the Sea of Light. However, the Haotian mirror's light spread out in all directions, guiding the light ribbons that were formed by the Great Tao of heaven and earth to gather towards it. Meanwhile, the spacetime in the Sea of Light was changing continuously. It looked as if wherever the Haotian mirror was, it was the center of the Sea of Light. However, how could Lin Feng and the rest sit back and watch it gather the Great Tao of the Spirit Sea again? Forget about the monkey, the churning purple chi in the sea of clouds that was formed by Lin Feng's magic power, and consciousness surged continuously. The river of time was also entangling the Great Tao of the Spirit Sea, preventing those silk-like light ribbons from landing on the Haotian mirror. Numerous Taiji diagrams gathered together at this moment, forming an incomparably huge Taiji diagram. In the center of the Taiji diagram, Lin Feng stood on it, and as his hands kept changing signs, streams of light surged on the Taiji diagram, guiding the light ribbons formed by the Great Tao of heaven and earth to land on his body, replacing the Haotian mirror as it occupied the center of the Sea of Light. However, on the other side, Sun Mirage Yudu attacked Lin Feng, and the huge black sun shrouded the heavens, causing the purple chi formed by Lin Feng's magic power and consciousness to look darker. Seeing the changes in the Haotian mirror and Lin Feng, how could Sun Mirage Yudu not know what Lin Feng was planning? In the center of the black sun, a purple brilliance suddenly shot out, turning the black sun into a purple sun. The terrifying brilliance shook the heavens and earth. After feeling this purple brilliance, his entire spirit sea began to tremble slightly. The space and time of heaven and earth that had been constantly folding and changing actually showed signs of instability. A broken horn flickered with purple light. It emerged from the black sun, and dyed the surrounding world purple. After this broken horn appeared, it didn't actively attack anyone. Instead, it began to attract the light of the great path of the spiritual sea, which gathered around it. Whether it was Lin Feng's body or the Haotian mirror, the ribbons of light that connected them seemed to have been cut apart by invisible blades. The broken horn began to be surrounded by the brilliance of the great path. Time and space twisted in the Sea of Light, and the broken horn seemed to become the center of the world. Lin Feng, the Supreme One Tao Sovereign, and the others didn't seem surprised at all. They all activated their magic power to strengthen their connection with the Spirit Sea. As the light on the broken horn flowed, it gradually became sluggish. The three parties targeted the brilliance of the great path in the Sea of Light, and they started a new fight. Meanwhile, Sun Mirage Yudu's demon power consciousness manifested its own image, and continued to attack Lin Feng. The huge silver-white Yudu beast's body was covered in black and purple light markings. They flowed continuously and formed an incomparably terrifying power. When its claw landed, a huge black sun condensed in the center of its palm. It covered all directions and covered Lin Feng's head. Sun Mirage Yudu's voice rang out in the void. The fight for the Spirit Sea is of great importance. You don't have your sword now, so I can only offend you for taking advantage of you. A grand voice rang out in the Sea of Light, and Sun Mirage Yudu's claw changed again. Other than the huge black sun in the center of his palm, another huge black sun appeared at the tips of his 5 fingers. Heavenly Illusory 6 Sun Claws was a unique demon divine art that Sun Mirage Yudu cultivated Heavenly Tao demon scriptures, and combined with his comprehension of the great path of heaven and earth. The 6 black suns fell towards Lin Feng together, causing the originally peaceful and senseless sea of light to feel a dry and hot feeling. The purple sea of clouds formed from his mana, and consciousness seemed to be burning at this moment. A cold glint flashed in Lin Feng's eyes, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Everyone is relying on their own abilities, so what's there to talk about who is taking advantage and who is losing? It's just that. He stretched out both of his hands, and the index fingers of his left and right hands touched together. 2 balls of light, one black and one white, appeared. Do you think you'll be able to take advantage just because you're taking advantage? 2 beams of light, one black and one white, rushed into the sky. Wherever the light passed, it attracted the light of the great path of heaven and earth in the spirit sea to get closer to the light. Then they were swept into the light, causing the 2 beams of light to become even more dazzling. In those great Daos, life and death, longevity and destruction, hardness and softness, false and real, light and heavy, up and down, clear and turbid, light and dark, end and end, countless great Daos that stood in opposition to each other gathered towards the 2 beams of light that Lin Feng had released. They were swept into them and separated into black and white. Wherever the light passed, time and space became blank. And in this blank, it didn't give off a feeling of extinction and loneliness. Instead, it seemed to contain endless possibilities. On Lin Feng's body, the black and white creation divine light also lit up at that moment. It shook the heaven and earth, exceeding what it had been in the past. Countless divine markings were imprinted in the sunlight that spanned across the void. They scattered and caused the entire sea of light to brighten up, causing the 6 huge black suns that shrouded his head to no longer be exclusive to the front. At that moment, Lin Feng himself was like a brilliant sun that was intertwined with black and white, illuminating the heavens. This black and white creation divine light merged with the black and white beams of divine light that Lin Feng had released earlier, and they became even more resplendent and condensed. The long river of time flowed continuously, circling around the 2 beams of light. Under the misty and mysterious brilliance, Lin Feng's magic, creation divine light, and the magic power of the bell of creation combined together, turning into a seemingly motionless light mist. In the light mist, primordial chaos could be vaguely seen. The primordial world opened up, and the yin and yang first appeared. The evolved earth, water, fire, and wind flowed continuously in a chaotic manner. Then the earth, water, fire, and wind stabilized, and the world was created. Clear chi floated up, turbid chi descended, and all living things began to emerge. Under the vicissitudes of the world, all living things multiplied and developed. After the age of desolation, they entered the golden age, and then entered the end of the world. Under the age of Dharma ending, everything withered, and finally, heaven and earth were completely extinguished. After the extinguishment, everything returned to the beginning, and the next era began anew. All these changes were ever-changing, but in the light mist, there was a kind of motionless and unchanging state. It was as if this was the true meaning of eternity, the only truth that was indestructible and indestructible. This was the highest achievement that Lin Feng had comprehended from the yin and yang fusion scripture. Eternal calamity light. This light looked unmoving and unchanging, but as Lin Feng pointed with his index fingers, it was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. It landed on the claws of Sun Mirage Yudu and collided with the 6 huge black suns. Wherever the light passed, the 6 huge black suns gradually collapsed, and the scorching feeling disappeared. Instead, it gave rise to a cold feeling. It was as if the universe had come to an end, and the stars were extinguished, heading towards the end. Sun Mirage Yuda's gaze became much more solemn. You still have such abilities even without a sword? His claws suddenly closed, and he crushed the 6 huge suns first. The black sunlight transformed into a rain of light that scattered and swept across the entire sea of light. It even broke the silk-like light that was manifested by the great Tao of heaven and earth. In the next moment, Sun Mirage Yudu roared into the sky, and the black god markings on the long horn on his head shuttled continuously. At the heart of his brows, an extremely terrifying black light emerged. When Lin Feng saw this, he narrowed his eyes. Not only could Xianli not follow him into the spirit sea, He also had to be careful when using Heaven Punishment Sword Chi and Heaven Punishment Sword formation. Otherwise, even though it wouldn't attract the hostility of the Spirit Sea, it would break his connection with the great Tao of the Spirit Sea. However, his expression did not show any signs of panic. With a thought, the capital of radiance formed by the power of the Grand Imperial Palace, and the Yin and Yang life and death formation no longer oppressed the heavenly enchantress Great Saint. Instead, it shrunk to a small spot of light and returned to his glabella. With the support of the power of Sun Mirage formation and life and death formation, Lin Feng's aura surged again, and a lump of light suddenly appeared above his head. Within the light, it actually condensed into a huge axe that could split the sky. Outside the Sea of Light, in the real world of the Spirit Sea, the Sun Mirage formation and life and death formation on top of Lin Feng's head displayed the changes of heaven and earth in the 6 transformations to the extreme. Meanwhile, Sun Mirage formation was also nurturing the terrifying Emperor extreme skill of heaven splitting. In the next moment, the Sun Mirage formation executed the last skill of the 6 transformations. 2 extremes returned to nothing. With the suppression of Sun Mirage Palace, everything in the formation wouldn't shatter, and the power of the changes of heaven and earth, 2 extremes returned to nothing, and Emperor extreme skill of heaven splitting surged together. In the world of the Sea of Light, it was the huge axe above Lin Feng's head that cleaved towards Sun Mirage Yuda's head. At the same time, he fused with the magic power of the long river of time formed by the Bell of Creation, and executed the Eternal Calamity Light again to attack Sun Mirage Yudu. With a cold whistle from Sun Mirage Yudu, the power of Yudu's mysterious light pierced through heaven and earth and collided with Lin Feng's Eternal Calamity Light and the huge axe. The Sea of Light rippled violently as though it would be torn apart at any moment. This forced the Haotian Mirror, the Enchantress, and future constellation Glazed Buddha Master to stabilize the Sea of Light first. At this moment, Lin Feng gave a low shout, and a purple flowing light flew out from his body. It was a golden bead that was flashing with purple radiance. It was the heavenly scarlet golden bead, and it transformed into flowing light that passed through layers of void and landed on the broken horn that originated from Yuhuang's celestial sea. When the 2 sides collided, the broken horn instantly trembled slightly, and the progress of the great Tao of heaven and earth in the Spirit Sea slowed down significantly. Sun Mirage Yudu let out an angry roar when he saw this. Before he could react, Lin Feng laughed, and a golden light flashed in one of his eyes. Then, a golden disc flew out from his eye and landed in the Sea of Light. The golden disc trembled, and a huge suction force was instantly released from it. The streams of light formed by the great Tao of heaven and earth gathered towards the golden disc like rivers returning to the sea. Chapter 1390. That golden disc that looked shallow seemed to be bottomless at that moment as it absorbed the great Tao's light. The Sea of Light trembled slightly, and as time and space changed, this golden disc had already occupied the center of the Sea of Light. Mirage Sun Yudu saw that disc, and his brows furrowed slightly. I seem to have seen this before in the war between the 2 worlds. I just didn't expect it to have such an effect. The unexpected change caught the people of Mirage Sun, Yudu, and the Void Temple off guard for a moment. The Enchantress and the monkey were slightly stunned when they saw this. The eyes of the future star-glazed Buddha Master in the distance, which had manifested from his magic power consciousness, also flickered slightly. The golden disc occupied the center of the Sea of Light, streams of light of the great Tao converging within, while layers of purple energy surged out from the golden disc, continuously spreading in all directions. In an instant, it covered a large area, engulfing the area occupied by the Great Void Temple, Yudu clan, and the monkey. And in that instant, when the people from both sides were exchanging blows, the change in the void of the Spirit Sea outside had also ended. The different space-time worlds overlapped and became one. The scene in front of everyone's eyes also changed. The originally boundless Sea of Light that seemed to be another world that was on par with the space of the Spirit Sea had shrunk significantly. It looked like a huge lake that was filled with golden water. On the shores of this golden lake, a few groups of people each occupied one side. Lin Feng looked up and saw that on the opposite side of the lake, there was a huge illusory ball of light. It was like a mountain peak, but also like a palace. It was split into 9 levels, and each level had a myriad of different scenes. They were also occupied by cultivators of Taishu Temple. On the highest level, the mysterious and unfathomable Great Void mysterious light flashed, supporting Lord Tai One amidst the light. It was as if he was in a marvelous realm that couldn't be observed, touched, or described. Above that huge illusory ball of light, there was a treasured mirror floating. Rays of mirror light spread out in all directions, guiding the great Tao of heaven to gather on itself. The spirit Qi and the spirit Sea gathered endlessly towards this treasured mirror. It was as if this mirror was the center of the creation of the universe. Tao Lord Tai closed his eyes, but it seemed as if a gaze shot out from his closed eyes and landed in the center of the giant golden lake. Silently, a golden disk floated on the surface of the lake. It flickered with a bright radiance, yet it was also eye-catching. It was Lin Feng's primeval golden lamp. At this moment, the golden disk was filled with golden liquid. It looked bright and ethereal, as if it was flowing with golden light. In the giant golden lake, streams of light were faintly discernible, constantly flowing and flowing, gathering with the primeval golden lamp as the center. Because of this, the premier golden lamp seemed to have replaced the position of the Haotian mirror, and became the center of the spirit sea, attracting the infinite great way of heaven and earth to gather here. On Lin Feng's left was a Yuda beast that was covered in shiny silver fur, its body glowing with purple light, and a large number of black runes and runes surrounding its body. Its body was like a small mountain, and it had manifested its true form. It was standing there with 3 long horns on its head, and one of them was half short. It was the current clan master of Yudu race, the 12 fantasy sons of Yudu. At this moment his expression was grave, and his gaze moved between the primeval golden lamp and Lin Feng in the center of the lake. Behind the fantasy sons of Yudu, there were 3 Yudu beasts that were similarly huge. 2 of them were strong practitioners of Yudu that had participated in the war between the 2 worlds. One was the strongest of the younger generation of Yudu race, Jingyan Yudu. When he was going through the first calamity, his demon power could already fight with other great demons of the last days. At this moment, Jingyan Yudu had already passed the last blight calamity and entered the last days realm. His demon power was world-shaking, and it made people's hearts palpitate. The other one was still going through the first calamity, and he was the son of fantasy sons of Yudu, Cloud Rising Yudu. Seeing these 2, beside Lin Feng, Wang Lin's gaze instantly became a bit colder. Beside Jingyan Yudu and Cloud Rising Yudu was a Yudu beast that was much smaller in size. It looked thin and weak. However, the aura of demon power coming off his body was even stronger than Jingyan Yudu, who had just entered the last days realm. His name was Shixing Yudu, and in the war between the 2 worlds, he hadn't stepped into the divine land. Instead, he had stayed behind to guard Yudu royal city. This time, he had left the mountain and entered the spirit sea with fantasy sons of Yudu race. Meanwhile, another great demon of the last days, Green Crest Yudu, was guarding Yudu royal city. Just this point alone made Zhu Yi and Wang Lin look at him more solemn. 4,000 years ago, during the war between the 2 worlds, Lord of the Highest One Dao, Lord of the Righteous One Dao, and the others had come into contact with Shixingyo. They knew that Shixingyo, who looked thin and weak, was actually slightly stronger than Green Crest Yudu and Empty Plain Yudu, who had fallen previously. However, this demon's personality was different from the other Yudu beasts. He didn't like fighting, so he rarely interfered in the war between Yudu race and other strong practitioners. Only when the situation was extremely important would he participate in the war for his race. The battle for the Spirit Sea was of great importance. If Taishu Temple or Xianmen Tianzong obtained the Spirit Sea, the pressure on Yudu race's survival would undoubtedly increase greatly. Therefore, even if Shixing Yudu was unwilling, he had no choice but to obey fantasy sons of Yudu's orders and step into the Spirit Sea to participate in the battle. To the right of Lin Feng, along the shore of the lake, there was a figure separated by a certain distance. They were Monkey, the Enchantress, and future Star-Glaze Buddha Lord. Silently, future Star-Glaze Buddha Lord sat beside the lake. His body was like glaze, showing great purity and extreme bliss. His 48,000 arms were all forming mudras, and his eyes were closed as though he was dead. Other than when Lin Feng took out the primordial golden lamp, his thoughts fluctuated slightly. At other times he was like a pure bystander, not speaking or moving. It was as though all the disputes had nothing to do with him, and they couldn't move him. Monkey, on the other hand, looked around future star-glazed Buddha Lord in annoyance, but there was no sign of golden cicada. This made him rather flustered and exasperated. Although the huge golden lake in front of them didn't look as vast and boundless as the Sea of Light, it was still extremely huge. It was like the sea of stars in the universe, giving Lin Feng and the rest a feeling that it was hard to cross. Lin Feng looked straight ahead, calmly looking at the Supreme One of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court on the other side of the lake, as well as the Haotian mirror above his head. He smiled slightly and flew up, landing in the center of the lake where the primordial golden lamp was. On the surface of the lake around the primordial golden lamp, there was a faint purple mist. That was the area occupied by Lin Feng's magic power and consciousness. At this moment, the area occupied by Lin Feng had already replaced the Taishu Temple, becoming the largest area among everyone, occupying nearly half of the area. And at this moment, he had naturally replaced the Taishu Temple, becoming the target of public criticism. Sect Master Lin, I'm sorry. The Supreme One of the Tao Master's tone was calm. Perhaps you are very confident, and I have never thought that others can't do what I can't do. However, the risk involved requires the entire human race to bear for you. If you fail, you won't be the only one who will suffer. I'm already old and timid. I can't bear to see such a thing. Although I'm helpless, I have to fight with you. The Haotian mirror above his head suddenly turned, and the faint mirror light shone towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled indifferently. Why are you so polite, Supreme One of the Tao Master? On the other side, Mirage Sun Yuda didn't say a word. He also flew up and rushed towards the center of the lake. The side of the lake near him was pitch black and flashed with faint light. At this moment, raging waves rose and attacked the primordial golden lamp in the center of the lake. Future star-glazed Buddha Lord still didn't move. The enchantress's gaze moved, but he also didn't move. Monkey stared at Lin Feng, and his face revealed a troubled expression. In the end, he gave a long sigh and sat cross-legged on the shore. He stared at Lin Feng and stared at future star-glazed Buddha Lord at the same time. Seeing the light from the Haotian mirror coming over, 7 colored halos floated around Lin Feng's body. He executed mysterious gate heaven escape and ascended step by step. It was as though he had surpassed the space-time everyone was in and was walking towards a higher level. However, the Haotian mirror's light turned and still chased after him. Lin Feng smiled and raised his palm gently, grabbing the air. The world of the spirit sea instantly trembled slightly, and an illusory dark starry sky appeared above everyone's head. Tens of thousands of stars twinkled, and the trajectories of countless stars seemed to have deviated. The powerful force of the turbulent star trajectories supported Lin Feng's body, making the magic power around him even more boundless. Specks of light that were like dust appeared around Lin Feng's body and expanded to form small worlds. The powerful force of Mount Meru in a mustard seed was displayed. Black and white divine light of creation surged around Lin Feng's body, and it incited the great Tao in the spirit sea to resonate continuously. The life and death formation above his head suddenly expanded, and under the suppression of the Grand Imperial Palace, it transformed into a kingdom of light that shook the heavens. In the next instant, this kingdom of light suddenly broke apart. It was as though a huge axe that could split the heavens had cleaved out from the kingdom of light, splitting apart the endless light, and splitting the heaven and earth in front of it. Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, the 2 strongest forces in the world of the Divine Land, collided at this moment. Lin Feng performed the 2 great Tao magical techniques of changing heaven and earth and yin and yang minute dust at the same time, together with his own divine light of creation. They supported the sky-splitting axe that seemed to exist but could split the heavens and earth, and suddenly broke the faint mirror light. But Lord Tai and the others seemed to have expected it. Their expressions did not change, and they all formed a seal. The broken mirror light of the Haotian mirror was split into 2, but it did not dissipate. Instead, it continued to envelop Lin Feng from both sides. But before they could get close, Lin Feng pointed with both of his fingers, and the bell of creation beside him turned into a long river of time. A beam of eternal light of calamity that was supported by the river of time, and his own divine light of creation shot out and swept across the void, instantly cutting the mirror light that had split into two. But at the same time, the huge figure of Sun Mirage Yudu had already arrived in front of Lin Feng, and his eyes flashed with cold light. Chapter 1391. Seeing Mirage Sun Yudu pouncing in front of him and the huge claw that covered the sky falling down on his head, Lin Feng's expression didn't change, and a faint smile still appeared on the corner of his mouth. He put his palms together in front of his chest and shouted, "Rise!" From his Naiwan palace, 3 trails of light rushed out and stood in front of Mirage Sun Yudu. A tall and sturdy young man stood in the void, and he looked strong and powerful. His appearance was exactly the same as Lin Feng's. Vigorous qi and blood flowed out from his body, and he was none other than his clone of Battle God. Beside the clone of Battle God was a giant that was 90 yards tall. There were 9 trails of clear qi around his body, and 9 trails of flowing light flashed together. They were none other than Lin Feng's 9 qi clones. On the other side of the 9 qi clones stood a figure that looked to be around 2 meters tall. He wore silver-white scale armor, and had the same facial features as Lin Feng himself, but there were 2 dragon horns on his head. He was none other than his clone of Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus's clone gave off a dragon roar, and revealed his true form in the void. He transformed into a silver-white dragon that was much larger than the 9 qi clones. Just by looking at its size, it seemed to be the same size as Mirage Sun Yudu. Mirage Sun Yudu looked at the 3 great clones of Lin Feng in front of him, and his gaze focused as if he had recalled something. He didn't reply and just stretched out his claws to grab at Lin Feng's 3 clones. Violent power gripped the void and stirred up the spirit sea. Huge waves rose up in heaven and earth, and they fused with the black light that filled the sky. They swept towards Lin Feng's true self and clones like a tsunami. Lin Feng's 3 clones didn't try to block Mirage Sun Yudu, this middle tribulation great demon. Instead, they shouted in unison, "Combine!" In the next instant, purple qi surged out from the surroundings of the 3 clones and wrapped them up. The purple qi rippled continuously and transformed into a vast sea of clouds. In the center of the purple sea of clouds, a clear light rushed into the sky. It broke through the purple qi and rushed straight into the horizon. A figure appeared in the clear light. His hair was scattered, and he was dressed in purple. On his forehead and in his eyes, there were taiji patterns slowly swirling. His appearance was exactly the same as Lin Feng's true self. Not only his facial features and external appearance, even the mana fluctuations he actively stimulated were completely the same as his main body, who was fighting the Void Temple on the other side. This Lin Feng, who had just appeared in the clear light, looked at Mirage Sun and Yudu and smiled. The spells on his hands changed, and the powerful spell of fighting heaven and earth changing was executed. The illusory starry sky above his head trembled continuously, and the terrifying power of shifting the orbit of the stars was fed back to his body. Then he saw his hands stretching out horizontally, and his index fingers came together to point at Sun Mirage Yudu. The mysterious eternal calamity light spewed out, and the river of time that was swirling around Lin Feng's true self spun in the void. The other end stretched over and augmented the eternal calamity light as well, causing the concept of power to become even more majestic. Being in the spirit sea, the execution of Lin Feng's eternal calamity light was like adding wings to a tiger. The laws of the great Tao were guided and gathered, causing the changes of creation to be like an eternal and inextinguishable radiance. With his focus on defense, even without the augmentation of the creation divine light of Lin Feng's true self, it transformed into layers of light screens to block the attack of Mirage Sun Yudu. Mirage Sun Yudu looked at this new Lin Feng, and he recalled the time when he had just led the Yudu race back to the boundless world. He had fought with Lin Feng for the first time without meeting him face to face. At that time, Lin Feng had displayed similar miraculous methods, but it wasn't as complete as today. Other than not having creation divine light, the cultivation of this new Lin Feng was exactly the same as the true self. Mirage Sun Yuda's gaze became even colder, and he started to execute his demon power to break through Lin Feng's defense. But after being stopped just like that, Lin Feng's two bodies changed again. His true self carried the Grand Imperial Palace and the Life and Death formation, and he suddenly changed targets. The powerful attack almost caught Mirage Sun Yudu off guard. Meanwhile, the new body formed by his three clones turned to face the people of Taishu Temple. Lin Feng smiled and looked at the Haotian mirror that seemed to be at the center of the universe, as well as the illusory ball of light that was like a pagoda and a mountain under the Haotian mirror. He put his palms together again. The mysterious waves of magic power instantly shrouded the nine heavens imperial court of Taishu Temple. The expressions of Dowie Dao Lord and the rest froze slightly. They couldn't be bothered to say anything else, and they immediately executed their magic power to the extreme, reinforcing the light and shadow of the nine heavens imperial court that was formed by magic power and spiritual qi. They had already recognized at the first moment that the spell that Lin Feng was executing was the Yin and Yang return to origin mystical realm. This spell was best at restraining other people's magic power combination spells and transformation spells. Enveloped by the Yin and Yang returning to origin mystical realm, the nine heavens imperial court of Taishu's light shadows suddenly felt like they were on the verge of collapse. One after another, mysterious and unpredictable mana slashed down, wanting to disintegrate the nine heavens imperial court. Dowie Dao Lord, Shoichi Dashin, Dowie Dao Lord, and Lin Daohan shone with indescribable and indescribable light. The great void mystic light that filled the sky gathered at the highest level of the nine heavens imperial court. Then it sprinkled down like flowing water, shrouding the entire nine heavens imperial court. The nine heavens imperial court that was shrouded by the great void mystic light was no longer shaken by Lin Feng's Yin and Yang return to origin mystical realm. As the Haotian mirror's light flowed, it once again shrouded Lin Feng. Lin Feng's body, which was shown by the mirror light, suddenly became sluggish. His whole body seemed to be approaching a state of stillness. Under the illumination of the Haotian mirror's light, the purple gas and clear light around his body gradually dissipated and dimmed. Lin Feng's body seemed to be gradually breaking apart, returning to the appearance of the three great clones. On the other side, Lin Feng's real body was fighting with Mirage Yudu, while his disciples, Zhu Yi Wang Lin and White Tiger Great Sage, were already fighting with Shixing Yudu, Jingyan Yudu, and Yunxing Yudu. White Tiger Great Sage's gaze was cold as he stared at Mirage Yudu and Yunxing Yudu. In the past, his father, the previous White Tiger Great Sage, had perished in the hands of Mirage Yudu. At this moment, he was glaring at Yunxing Yudu like a tiger watching its prey, which forced Mirage Yudu to divert some of his attention. Although Yunxing Yudu's divine arts and demonic power were strong, he could only retreat temporarily when facing White Tiger Great Sage, who could invoke the Dharma-ending tribulation. In this way, Jingyan Yudu and Shixing Yudu, who were facing Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and White Tiger Great Sage, couldn't gain the upper hand. Lin Feng's real body was also paying attention to the situation of the battle with Taishu Temple. Seeing his clone being shrouded by the Haotian mirror's light and on the verge of disintegration, he didn't panic at all. Instead, he pointed at the primordial golden lamp in the center of the golden lake beneath his feet. The golden liquid in the primordial golden lamp instantly turned into a faint stream of light and soared into the sky, landing on the clone that was shrouded by the Haotian mirror's light. Strangely enough, when the Haotian mirror was touched by the golden light, the Haotian mirror's light was no longer as mystical as before. The dim mirror light kept shaking, and it looked like the ripples of water. Lin Feng's body, which was shrouded by the mirror light, immediately regained his freedom. He used mysterious gate heavenly escape and jumped out of the mirror light. This, Dao Lord Tai and the others frowned. Feeling the change in the golden light and the Haotian mirror, they gradually understood. It's actually doing the opposite, drawing the power of the great Tao of the Spirit Sea to manifest the light to dissolve the mysteries of the Haotian mirror, which was born from the creation of heaven and earth. What kind of existence is that golden disk? Lin Daohan's eyes flickered when he saw this scene. I've miscalculated. The Spirit Sea is our temple's geographical advantage, but it's also the geographical advantage of the master of the celestial sect of wonders. Only in the Spirit Sea can he use this method to dissolve the mysteries of the Haotian mirror. No wonder he's obsessed with seizing the central area of the Sea of Light. Tao Lord Xianyi said. To dissolve the Haotian mirror's light, the light in the golden lamp is also constantly being consumed. His three-body combination technique shouldn't be able to be maintained for a long time. After a moment of silence, Tao Lord Tai stood up. In that case, it will become a battle of attrition between us and Xianmen Tianzong. In the end, it will only benefit others. The Dragon Clan hasn't arrived yet, but it's very likely that they've entered the Spirit Sea. This is also a hidden danger for the master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, Shoichi Dashin said. Tao Lord Tai shook his head slowly. If he dares to do this to consume the power of the Haotian mirror, I'm afraid he's prepared. Now is not the time to be conservative. You guys guard the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. I'll go meet the master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders and strive to break the deadlock. As he spoke, he took a step forward and was already out of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. Tao Lord Tai closed his eyes and walked in the air. Step by step he arrived in front of Lin Feng. Sect Leader Lin, please. After Tao Lord Tai finished speaking, he stretched out both his hands. His jade-white palms changed and formed a grand seal. Streams of light appeared and turned into a huge ball of light in the sky. It was also divided into 9 layers. It looked like a small version of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. With a push of Tao Lord Tai's palm, the ball of light pressed towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng's finger lightly touched the primordial golden lamp under him. A golden light shot up into the sky and immediately cut off a ray of light from the Haotian mirror that was shining towards him. Then the Tai Chi pattern on his forehead kept spinning. Rays of light flowed in his eyes and then spurted out, falling into the void and turning into a Tai Chi pattern. In the center of each Tai Chi pattern, there was a Taoist sitting upright. Their facial features were similar to Lin Feng's. Next, these Taoists all pointed their fingers at Tao Lord Tai. Lin Feng also pointed his finger. With this finger, multiple spacetime seemed to merge into one. All the Tai Chi patterns and the Taoist sitting upright in the center of the pattern disappeared, leaving only Lin Feng. The great Tao manifested the mystery of the Only One, shaking the spiritual sea and the heaven and earth. The starry sky of the universe was constantly shaking at this moment. The terrifying scene of starlight falling from the sky could be vaguely seen. With this move of Lin Feng's changing heaven and earth, the small version of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court that was held up by Tao Lord Tai's palm suddenly showed signs of disintegration. Tao Lord Tai's expression did not change. His hand seal changed again. The small version of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court suddenly became blurry, as if some other change had occurred. The leaders of the 2 strongest sects in the human cultivation world of the Divine Land finally fought at this moment. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.